Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Hey, happy Friday. Can I encourage you all to move up a little bit, please, so that we can have a little bit more of a conversation? Oh, hey, thank you. You're moving up? Hey, my friend, look at that. Hey, thanks, guys. I really appreciate that. You've got some really great speakers coming, and I think it would be awesome if you were closer to them so that we can have a little bit more of an intimate conversation in this large tent. Plus, it might be warmer, as Alex is saying, under the lights up front. Cool. That's all I had to say. Enjoy the next session.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you again, and thanks for your time for being here for this session on Agri-Tech meets FinTech, or FinTech meets Agri-Tech. Again, for introduction, my name is Abhay Parikh. I work with United Nations Capital Development Fund. We are a UN agency mandated to invest for private and public sector, unlocking private and public sector investments, especially around digital economies and making sure that economies grows to the next level. Our investments are largely in digital economies across the globe. Today, we are here with a panel of people who are in the thick and thin of Agri-Tech and FinTech here in India. And I think it will be great to hear from them how lines are blurring between FinTech and Agri-Tech. To give you a sort of, let me set a context to what we are going to discuss today. We all know farmers have challenges around access to capital, access to investments, access to finance, market, and inputs. Agri-Tech have been able to address this challenge and reduce the asymmetry of information between farmers and other value chain actors, which has gone to a great level, but the access to finance still remains a challenge. On the other side, we know FinTechs have been able to manage this for other low-income segments or for other underserved segments like micro and small enterprises. But again, FinTechs have also been shying away from entering into agri-financing. But there's now this trend that's emerging where the lines between Agri-Tech and FinTechs are blurring, especially around usage of data and profiling of customers, and how that data that is being generated by Agri-Tech can be used by FinTechs to create alternate credit scores or alternate financing models for smallholder farmers. Especially the reach that Agri-Tech provides to FinTechs is another key takeaway for this new sector. So we're going to discuss these things and these points today in the session. I would like to introduce you to the panel. So we have Ritu here from Ankur Capital. She's the co-founder of Ankur Capital. It's a venture capital firm which invests in Agri-Tech and other startups. Ritu has been working on innovations and has been working with companies like Philips and Unilever from bringing innovations from lab to outside in the market. She's a PhD in physics. So welcome, Ritu. Thanks for being here. We have Tharkeshwar. Mr. Tharkeshwar is business head of Dwara. He has more than 15 years of experience of banking, especially with large bankers in India like Axis and ICICI in agribusiness financing. He was also an investment banker with Eco Credit, and now he's with Dwara for a couple of years. Welcome, Tharkeshwar. And I have Amit here. He heads the strategic alliance for a fast emerging startup in Agri-Tech space called AgroStar. And Amit has also been working on FinTech and CleanTech for poor across South Asia and Southeast Asia for the last 5 to 10 years. So welcome, Amit. I would now open the floor for you to introduce your organizations. Let's just start with Ritu.
Thank you, Abhay. Good morning, everybody. I know it's a bit early, maybe not so early anymore, right? Anyway, so I'm one of the people who run Ankur Capital. Ankur is a early stage investor, so we invest early into companies, and our mandate for investments is what we call new and disruptive technologies for the next billion. And that means we're talking about the masses in India and other countries. And what's most exciting to me is that it puts agriculture and food squarely in the middle of all of that. So we are a prolific investor, but 70 or 75% of our capital is deployed in ag tech and food. And going forward, we are super bullish about this. We think there is a lot that can be done, a lot that is being done, and we should be seeing some of the scale coming from these new innovations. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Ritu. Amit, would you like to go next? And I think we have a video to play for AgroStar, right?
Hello, everyone.
Right.
So yeah, I represent AgroStar, but before I speak about AgroStar, I would request to play a small video which will give you a full context. How do we connect with farmer? And then I think I can speak a few words. So may I request to please play the video.
हा नमस्कार.
एग्रोस्टार कंपनीतून मी अस्मिता बोलतेय. मुरलीधर साहेब यांच्याशी बोलणं होते का माझं?
हा मॅडम, हा बोला.
हा, तर मी असं चेक करते की सर ऍप्लिकेशनवरती तुम्ही क्लिक केलेलं आणि तुमच्या फुलकोबीवरती तुमच्या आळ्यांचे छिद्र पडलेलं असं दिसतंय.
हो, सेम प्रॉब्लेम. हा बरोबर.
At AgroStar, we understand the farmer's requirement and we use technology, data and agronomy knowledge to suggest the right solution for the Indian farmer.
आपल्याकडे त्याच्यासाठी डाव कंपनीचे सक्सेस नावाचं औषध आहे, हे तुम्ही देऊ शकता. तुमची मी बुकिंग घेतीये.
हो.
ओके, ठीक आहे. धन्यवाद सर. एग्रोस्टारला आपला वेळेने ऑर्डर दिल्याबद्दल.
थँक्यू.
थँक्यू.
Now, farmer did not run pillar to post to seek advice or a solution for their crop. It's all available on our app. Our 300 plus strong team is working day and night with a simple objective to bring a smile on the farmer's face.
I think the video gives you a fair idea about AgroStar. We are the India's foremost agtech startup. We work with more than 3.5 million farmers to provide them agri-input solutions and advisory at their doorstep. We have a strong team of 400 plus agri-advisors which work directly with farmer through two platforms. So we have a state-of-art voice platform. It's a company-owned and company-operated call center, where a farmer with a basic feature phone and with a zero balance can give us a missed call. We call them back, we connect with them, we understand their problem, and we deliver the solution. I think the second emerging and aggressive platform that we have is our Android platform. So we have AgroStar Agri Doctor app, which is available in 12 Indian languages, including English, where a farmer, who has a smartphone can connect with us and we solve their problem. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Andor.
Good morning. My name is Tarkeshwar. I represent Dwara e-Registry. Dwara e-Registry is incubated, or startup is promoted by the Dwara Trust with a mission. Dwara Trust has a mission to make each individual and each enterprise in India to get a financial access. So with that mission, they have set up a Dwara e-Registry to work in the rural areas, especially in the segments of agriculture and MSME and livestock. With that, since this is a 9 months old startup, we have started working in the agriculture, especially in the areas of providing land identification and farmer profiling, and imbibed with the remote sensing technology and GIS technology with the artificial intelligence technologies. With this, we expect that we would be providing solutions to the governments and production companies, our procurement companies, seed companies, and we will connect these farmers or small and marginal farmers to the banks and insurance companies. Yeah.
Thank you, Tarkeshwar. So let's now move to discussion, which everyone's waiting for. So I'll just start with first question, and I think we can start with Amit and come here on this side. Amit, as part of the process and as a part of this agri-tech, how do you see the merging of these two models where fintech is merging with agri-tech? And my second question, that would be, what is the business model that's emerging out of it, which is impacting the end customer? How do you see the whole business model coming out between agri-tech and fintech merging together?
So, Abhay, I think at AgroStar, we see a clear synergy. We get, more than 500 farmer orders every day that, we have to deliver at their doorstep. And you would be surprised to know that 100% is cash on delivery. So we deal with cash on a daily basis. And, this is where we see a clear synergy with fintech. We have tried so many partnerships or work around with, companies like Vodafone, M-Pesa, and others. But what we feel is that, the fintech requirement of farmers are completely different from the fintech requirement of a normal person, who is probably using fintech for money transfer or maybe, making some deposits. So, and what we have seen is, especially after 4G becoming a lot cheaper in India and entry of, low price smartphones, farmers are switching to smartphones. Yeah, so just to give you an example, in last few years, we have got more than 2 million downloads on our app. Yeah, and hundreds and thousands of farmers are using our app on daily basis. And they are actually uploading the photos, they're uploading the videos. So if a farmer can upload a photo or a video, if a farmer can write content on the app, he can definitely transact on the same smartphone, right? But we are an tech player and we don't understand the fintech products. We don't understand so interestingly, we understand the farming behavior of a farmer. We know how do they behave, how do they transact throughout the year or maybe throughout a cropping cycle. But we don't understand what is their fintech behavior. And I think this is where we see synergies with fintech players that look, we are open and we are ready to share the farming behavior of a farmer, and this is where the fintech players need to work, and they need to come up with the right set of product or maybe right set of offering for the farmer. So this is how we see a model emerging up. Though we largely work on input side, but what we have seen is that the major factor which leads farmer to transact in cash is because the forward linkage, where a farmer goes and sells his or her produce in market, that particular transactions happen in cash in India. And unless we digitize that particular, transaction of the ecosystem, it's very tough to, shift farmer to the digital economy. We transact digitally because we get our salary in our bank account. Yeah, imagine if we get money in cash. I don't know how much would we be spending, in terms of digital. So I think there are a lot of, so yes, there is an input side of the digital economy or the fintech, but I think there's a forward linkage piece of this ecosystem, which also, needs to be digitized. Yeah. So this is how we see fintech emerging and working with agtech startups.
Great. Those are really valid points, and I think it comes from the experience. So Ritu, do you want to add on to what Amit just
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll build on what Amit said, right? I think the problem of having fintech in farming is the lack of two problems. One is sort of the lack of data that is visible, partially because this has been a cash economy, and the tracking of that cash is not something that is available for a lender or any financial player, let's put it this way, right? So that's one problem, that the data is kind of missing, right? The second is the size, right? So in a country like India and many other countries, we're talking about smallholder farmers. So this is not your 10,000 acres kind of P&L of a farm. You're talking about sub 2 acre kind of farms here. So the cost of actually acquiring the customer, servicing that customer is just really, really high, right? So those two things are things that today we see starting to get addressed. And this is all thanks to what we've had. And I like to say we've built our digital highways, and we're starting to see reap the benefits of having built that. The digital highway, as Amit was saying, allows a lot of digitization of different parts of what is happening in farming and farming value chains that is happening. And secondly, it allows you a direct access to a small farmer, and the cost of knowing what the P&L or the balance sheet of that farmer is something that you can then get on your phone pretty easily, as opposed to having to send somebody out, do all of this other stuff. So that it's bringing down those costs. So I think those are the two things that are being addressed by ag tech, which is why it leads to a sort of a conversion with fintech. And there's a third thing, which is more of an ecosystem thing. There are the payments players, right? At the end of the day, like whether it is a WhatsApp Pay or a Google Pay or a Paytm that have come up, that have allowed that transfer, and UPI, let's not undersell UPI. Transactions can happen digitally. Now, these things are all in isolation today, with little pieces of it starting to come together, but I think eventually it will all come together. For a lender to extend credit in this market, it is important that I have data, both about production, about cash flows, as well as assets, right? So what Amit was saying, Amit may have data on, buying patterns, right? But unlike those of us living in urban India that get salaries deposited directly in a bank, and so a lender can come in and see, you have a history, that has not been happening on the output side. So you can't quite see what, how cash flows are working for a particular farmer. So as soon as we start digitizing that, land records, that's on the asset side. I don't know what you own. So if you do default, where do I go? Right? So all of that, as it starts getting digitized, I think will unlock the credit piece, and will also develop products that are more appropriate. Every bank today wants to give a 1-year loan, right? Which is not necessarily what a farmer needs or a value chain player needs to start with. But how do you unlock those working capital notes that are loans, et cetera, that are appropriate for the crop cycles is important. And as this data darkness gets addressed, I think you will have new fintech players. I'm cynical about old-fashioned banks. They will still take their time. But new fintech players sort of come in and say, look, here's an opportunity, and I'm going to, I think I can service this customer and make money at the same time with it.
Great, thank you. Tarkeshwar,
yeah. Thank you, Ritu. 2 points you have mentioned. One is small and marginal farmers and data highways and the convergence between agri-tech and fintech. The fundamental background of this is kind of small and marginal and tenant farmers constitutes about 85% of kind of farming population. And the second point is, most important point is, as per the government data itself, it says that 30% of Indian farming is done by the tenant farmers. These two, any disruptive technology comes and it has a major influence of this large population livelihoods. The point number 2 is, the farmer and the land parcel and crop. This is the relationship between the farming for the any agriculture activity. Now, there are two external players in this relationship. One is the markets and one is finance. The markets, if I say markets, it's a kind of input market as well as the output market. That is a backward integration and forward integration, where agri-tech companies have a role to play, and there have been many agri-tech companies were trying to integrate with this triangle, farmer, land parcel, and crop, integrate with the markets. Now, coming to the fintech companies. Fintech companies wanted to integrate their cycle in the form of the working capital or the capital provision for the farmer to cultivate a crop in the particular land piece. Now, if you can converge these two, like agri-tech companies are working for the increasing the yield and linking the markets, where the fintech companies are working on the financial provision. If we were trying to converge both these cycles, then it will have a major impact. The point number 2 is nowadays many of the fintech companies are providing the transactional finance to the farmers. Like it's not the based on the land, or it's not the based on the credit score or traditional credit scores. Now it's based on the transaction, particular transaction. If a transaction, a farmer wanted to sell a produce of paddy of 100 bags, this is the particular transaction. The credit score model has to be developed on the particular transaction. Once the transaction is completed, that's it. So here in this kind of transactional fintech companies will provide a kind of production cycle, as well as they are converging into the financial inclusion to the particular farmer. So there is a need for the convergence, and the road to the forward road to the convergence of the fintech and agri-tech is already there. There are many companies working on the transactions on this kind of transactional finance.
Thank you so much for your points. And now I think I'll go more on the granular side of it and try to understand. We all know it's a great market, and there's a line blurring between fintech and agri-tech. But coming from your experiences, what are the success factors where you see the adoption would happen on the demand side? Like, we are throwing a new solution to farmers. What do you see are the 2 or 3 success drivers that will actually make sure that when the lines are blurred and new models emerging, farmers will adopt it? So again, maybe we can start with Amit.
So I think most of the examples and success stories that I'll share is more on the agri-tech side, because this is where we have been able to drive the adoption. I think understanding farmer behavior, and so I'll give you a simple example that first you need to make that particular farmer transact, right? So I'll give you a simple example, like a Flipkart or Amazon. We also give, cashback to our farmers, right? And what we have seen is that once they transact, right, then adoption is very easy. And then, you have campaigns like farmer referral. And I think trust is the biggest factor when it comes to money. So where, if I have to talk about AgTech, if the moment a farmer places order and it get delivered to his or her doorstep, you still have a turnaround time of 2 to 3 days. And if farmer does not like anything, it could be an experience, it could be a transaction, they have a choice to cancel that order, right? But when it comes to fintech, or when it comes to transacting with the money, trust is the biggest factor, because it's immediate, right? And you can't reverse it. So what we have seen, what has worked in our favor is that you make a few influential farmer adopting something, and definitely there could be some carrots that you offer to these influential farmers. But once you have built the trust among this small set of consumer, adoptions become very easy through referrals. So one success that we have seen in case of driving the digital adoption is building the trust, and then scaling it up through referrals. So this is one example. What we have seen is that which may not be in the case of vanilla e-commerce, but in case of an AgTech and agri e-commerce, is that we create value. right? If I have to talk about Flipkart or Amazon, you buy a consumer good and that's all, right? You want to buy an iPhone or you want to buy a Samsung, you get it at your doorstep, right? But in case of agri e-commerce and agtech, what we have seen is that we create value. So we just don't deliver the product. I think after product gets delivered, the real work starts. This is where we provide them product specific advisory. We ensure that we handhold them till the time they harvest the crop. And this is where we see the real value. So we work with one of the leading NBFC in India, where we are creating an ecosystem so that farmer can have access to finance based on the alternate data points that we generate through our tech platform. And so personally, I was in field, and I asked this farmer that you have taken a loan, and let's say if there is unexpected rain that happens, or unexpectedly the temperature goes high beyond the control, how are you going to repay, or would our loan get affected? So the farmer says, sir, whether the rain happens or the temperature increases, that only God knows. That you don't know, I don't know. What we value is that nobody calls us every week, nobody asks how is your crop, nobody tells us what to do, what not to do. And this is where we see that farm, and I'm talking about the area where government declared a loan waiver, but we got our money back. So the value that we created over there helped the farmer, or helped us to create that fear or apprehension among the farmer that if I do something wrong, the value, the advisory that I get at my doorstep, it stops from tomorrow. And I think that kind of led them to repay the money where government said that you just simply, you can skip the payment. So I think trust and value and income generation, these are the three factors which has led our success story so far in the last 6 years.
Yeah. Great, thank you for those inputs. So Ritu, from more of an investor side, you've seen so many different agri-techs. So what do you see are those success factors?
So I think I'd like to separate, let's talk about agri-tech first, and then I'll come back to fintech on top of agri-tech, right? And I think your question is, do you see farmers adopting agri-tech? And I want to change your question a little bit, Abhay, right? I think there's a farmer and there's a value chain that sits on top of the farmer. And I think it's important that ag-tech addresses the entire system. And it's not always clear that the farmer should adopt the agri-tech, right? The value chain can also adopt the agri-tech and still use that to benefit the farmer. So I'm a big believer that there is a large value chain on top. There is a lot of agri-tech that is happening and addresses it. So for example, we are invested in a company called Cropin, and what they do is they use remote sensing as well as on-ground data to allow monitoring of fields, if you like, right? Now, the buyer of this product is not, and give advisory and SOPs and all of that kind of good stuff. Now, the buyer of this product is not a farmer. The buyer of the product is the value chain, whether it's a processor, whether it's an input player, whether it's a bank, whether it's a financier, that then uses it to be able to service its customer or its supplier, which is the farmer, on the other side. Right? So I think adoption of agri-tech needs to happen all the way. You can't force fit things down a farmer's throat. That's just not right, in my opinion. That's just not, I mean, they don't see value in it, right? But where they see value, they adopt, right? People buy inputs, and we have a company, these guys do this. You are changing how I have done business, how I have transacted or how I have bought inputs to do my business my entire life, and you're making that better, you're making that more convenient, you're making that more transparent to me. I will adopt. We see growth rates which are kind of crazy, right? I mean, in this. And stickiness, yeah? More importantly than farmers adopting, sticking to it if the service is of value and they see value, right? So a small farmer is pretty tough on making sure that he or she gets value. Right? And as soon as you are in the iffy gray area of value, adoption is not something that kind of happens, yeah? So I think once this layer of agri-tech gets adopted across, finance and credit is a simple need. That's a demand-led thing. If you have the appropriate products, I don't think you'll have any problem with adopting that piece at all. But I think you need that other adoption to happen.
Great. Thank you so much for those inputs. Takeshwar, your
Yeah.
views?
For a major enabler in this sector is a kind of a public investment, I would say, in kind of profiling in the farmers and profiling the land records, profiling the land parcels. If this is this is the activity any agri-tech company or any company and a private investment may not be able to do. If a kind of public investment happens in a kind of proper profiling land parcels, farmers and lands, and put in a proper platform where all agri-tech or fintech or any public company can access and use this information for the market linkages and financial provision or any kind of benefit to any kind of value chain development.
Thank you so much for your inputs. So I think what is eCode is value and trust are the two key factors that drive adoption. So we don't have much time, so I'll quickly run through the third question that I have, and I'll request quick answers on that. Is what do you see the challenges that will be coming when these two are merging, especially on the customer side? What are the challenges that you see, especially with the data being used in these emerging models? So quick 1 minute answers will be really appreciated.
So I'll keep it short. I think the challenge, I think I mentioned in first question itself, that we understand the farming behavior of the farmer, and we cannot translate it into the transaction, the fintech transaction for that particular farmer. And I think most of the fintech players today, they operate largely in urban and semi-urban India, and a majority chunk of farmers that exist in India lies in the rural India. And I think the rural fintech requirements are completely different from the urban fintech requirements, at least in India, I can say. So I think the challenge is the fintech player has to, calm down in the rural market. They need to understand what is the life cycle or what is the journey of a farmer, and what are the fintech pain points of that particular farmer in that journey. And now once they understand that, we are more than capable to provide right set of data, right set of stories and insights to them, so that they can come up with right offering for the farmer. I think that's the challenge that I see on the fintech side, that they need to understand the rural market really well.
They have to go to the ground and understand the life cycles.
Yeah.
Ritu, your views?
I see the challenge at, every time I talk to a banker, I see the challenge, and it's more of a macro kind of thing to kind of enter this space, right? One is they will tell you about loan waivers. This is not a risk that they can underwrite and sort of do. And yes, these guys may have had luck somewhere that somebody paid, but on a scale perspective, I don't think you can work that way. It creates fear in people to lend. The second piece of it is what they call diversion risk. And when I'm giving a loan to a farmer, are they really using it for farming, or is it for a wedding, or is it for a medical need, etc.? And so saying, is it my loan going towards productive uses, and how do I actually kind of manage that? And tech can somewhat address that and address collections basically with it, right? And I think as an ecosystem, I think the larger thing that we have not talked about is data privacy. Yeah, right? I mean, we're all talking about collecting data of a farmer and all of that good stuff. I think at some point, how exactly this data is going to be handled, how you share data, how that's going to work when an ag tech and a fintech works together, I think those things are not something that are being addressed today, and they will need to be soon.
Great, thanks.
I think
your points.
I have one point in this challenge for the fintechs. Building an alternative credit mechanism. Still, all NBFCs or MFIs or traditional banking channels are working on the traditional kind of credit scoring mechanism, like CR reports and all. But somewhere down the line, fintechs has to develop a kind of alternative scoring mechanism where the farmers and the small and marginal farmers, where they don't have a traditional credit background or history of the loan taking in the past. So that is the one thing, the big challenge for the fintechs to develop.
Thank you so much. We still have 5 minutes. 4. Can we take 2 questions? Is that okay? We can open the floor for 2 questions. We have 4 minutes effectively, so welcome for any questions.
Hi, my name is Ram. I work with ICRISAT. My question is, does fintech traction drive agtech adoption, or it's the other way around?
Any second question, so we can answer both together? Yeah.
Yeah. This is Vijay. I run a company called Cgiar. Agric Technologies Private Limited is a company name. See, I have been in the hardware, device manufacturing for irrigation. So irrigation is a huge, irrigation has huge impact in agtech results as such, right? And there are huge pump players and drip players and whatnot, right? When we really approach, these investors, whoever, so they're not very interested in these kind of things. But I see irrigation can actually influence the whole output of the crop, right? Can we convert these devices or hardware as a service play? For example, you see set-top boxes are being sold earlier, but all these Tatas or Reliance or any of them converted as a service, right? Which is not so important, but all the farmers are also using these things. Why don't we convert this so-called hardware as a service this in country, and which can actually drive, it can also be a data point to calculate the agriculture risk, right? When there is irrigation risk, there is an output risk, right? Which can give a right inputs. So can we integrate these kind of things? And my question is, the investors are not really keen in dealing with companies which are hardware. Can it be, which can, with the combination of agtech, fintech, come into this hardware play and convert into a big deal, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much. So I open the floor and
can I answer first question?
Sure.
I think,
let's just be quick. Yeah.
So the answer it is both ways, and I'll give you a very practical case. So we have partnered with the State Bank of India, which is the largest bank in the country, and they have a mobile banking app which is called SBI YONO. Now, a lot of farmers are using that fintech platform. What SBI realizes that we need to go beyond fintech because it's a farmer and they have needs. They have agtech needs, and they partnered with us where we provide agri input advisory in their mobile banking app itself, and farmer can show interest in agri input products also. So we see thousands of farmers landing on our page through the fintech platform of State Bank of India. So this is the case where fintech is driving agri-tech adoption. The second classic example is our agri input lending partnership, where, as I said, that we need to digitize the forward linkage piece of the ecosystem, where once the farmer sells his or her produce, it has to be digitized. So we work with another fintech player in India, where they set up their assisted fintech point near the local mandi, where a farmer can sell the produce and can immediately deposit the money in the bank account. And this is where we saw agri-tech driving the fintech. So I think it is going to be both ways.
Thanks, Amit. So Ritu, do you want to answer the second question around?
I'm not sure what the question is.
So,
right? Is the question is why investors don't look at hardware companies, or
So I think the question is how hardware can also be used as a shared service and can be integrated into agri-tech or a fintech model. And
I just think we need people to innovate against that. If you have someone sitting here who has a distribution network that perhaps can put that out there and pilot and see how the adoption works.
We try to work with AgroStar. AgroStar says that you need to have the big service network across the place, wherever they are working, because you are a hardware. So hardware is untouchable for all these e-commerce players also. They think that you need to have a service network before we take you. And the investor says that India is not the place for agri-tech, the hardware startups, we are not there. What I mean to tell you is once the scale, is not there, you can't have a quality service for because of once the scale is not there, I can't provide a service tech support, and I can't even try to.
So, but I think that that's a challenge that any hardware, even if you make a phone, right, at the end of the day, right? You need to be providing service, right? So I think the innovation needs to be in how you provide the service without putting somebody, you know, in every whatever taluka or every whatever, right? So I think it's hard to accept that a customer will buy hardware and that there is no recourse to service, right? So I think the innovation perhaps needs to come in how you will service this at a cost that makes sense, right? I mean, so chicken and egg problem, whether you're selling a new product in urban India or whether you're selling it in rural India, right? It's the same problem. But service and hardware are critical together because otherwise the buyer doesn't want to buy.
Great. I think we have already the red flag raised. So we will close this session here. This has been a great session. To summarize, we've heard that trust and value are definitely important when you have to drive adoption. And the lines are definitely blurring. It's, again, agri-tech drive fintechs or fintech drive agri-tech. It's case-to-case basis that has to be driven in the market, right? So thanks again for your time, all the three panelists. And thank you again for your time for being part of the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, hello everyone. So we're going to get our next session started. We've got a couple of videos to show you all, and then I'll have our panelists come on stage. So hang tight, watch the videos, and thanks for being here.
Technology is helping build a better picture of farming across the globe. But Farm Inc. version 2. Our new chatbot is entirely web-based. We've optimized it to be as easy to access as possible. No app installed, no social media logins. We've discovered a conversational design is key to driving an engaged learning experience. Users also tell us that trusted farmer networks are key, so at every opportunity, we encourage joining group discussions and building a network of farming peers. Through our user testing, we found game mechanics and progression systems greatly improved interest and engagement. Creating a new course is as simple as writing a Google document. However, the output is something farmers are much more likely to read. Farmers are also generated profiles that keep track of their learning progress and peer network. These features were forged from countless user testing iterations. We asked a few of our previous user testers if they'd be willing to let us show you how farmers show us.
Okay, one thing I want to go. It's very simple for the average farmer in Africa to understand because most of them they can relate to them. Yeah.
When you don't know, okay, I didn't know myself. I didn't know that I'm supposed to scout my maize like very often, like quickly. This is in terms of weekly aspect, so that if I see traces of the eggs, there's something I can do at that early stage.
Yeah.
You are in that notion that you wish to be winning everywhere, and then when you find yourself maybe I've just got it wrong, what you've just stuck, you feel like I should do it
to get memories. It's a good way of learning.
If when I finish the first stage, I'm looking forward to a next stage and probably learning something more. Related to the same discussion. Yeah.
So what's next? It's not just the product for farmers that has been upgraded. We've included a way for anyone to create their own chatbot and take advantage of all the design learnings we've built in. If you need a way to engage farmers on the ground, we've made something you can use out of the box. You can create your own custom chatbot content for farmers and have it accessible via a simple URL. We've learned a lot about how to rapidly deploy this type of product to farmers and can help organizations acquire users. Most importantly, we want to prove that there is improved knowledge in the field, so we've prototyped a dedicated analytics platform and API to serve this sole purpose. We are excited to connect up digital farming on the ground. For opportunities to work with us, please get in touch.
Hi, this is Dave Hodson from Sinnet. Together with Diane Saunders at John Innes Centre in the UK and colleagues at EIR, Ethiopia, we've developed the MARPL diagnostic system for wheat yellow rust. So this is a revolutionary diagnostics based on nanopore sequencing that gives us strain level diagnostic for yellow rust in just 2 days. And the whole system fits inside a suitcase. So it's a lab in a suitcase. Since the Scale Up Award from the Big Data platform, we've managed to secure additional funding through Gates Foundation and DFID project. We've had a landmark paper just published in BMC Biology, and we've undertaken validation and optimization of the whole protocol. We're just about to start building capacity in Ethiopia, so the team will be out there at the end of November, and we'll be looking to set up 5 MARPL hubs in the country. The project is generating huge amount of interest. We managed to win the BBSRC Innovator of the Year award in the UK in the category for international impact. And just this week, Diane was demonstrating the system to Bill Gates and also the UK Secretary of State for International Development. So a lot of interest being generated now. The next steps with MARPL, we're looking to get the 5 hubs set up and running in Ethiopia. We're going to have 4 UK PhD students that are helping with that process, and we'll be integrating the results into the Ethiopia wheat rust early warning advisory system that we've established in country. We're looking to develop the methodology for wheat stem rust, and we're also looking to expand to other countries, probably Kenya, but then also South Asia.
The Seeing is Believing project, led by IFPRI in partnership with CABI, explores the potential for using smartphone pictures to manage agricultural production risk. Here's how it works.
This is Sam. Sam is growing paddy. Sam's paddy got damaged by a pest. Luckily, Sam purchased insurance that comes with advice. Sam sends a picture of the damaged crop to an expert. The expert will review the picture and send Sam a personalized recommendation that can help Sam minimize the damage and improve yields. Sam will receive this advice directly into his.
The Seeing is Believing project, led by IFPRI in partnership with CABI, explores the potential for using smartphone pictures to manage agricultural production risk. Here's how it works.
This is Sam. Sam is growing paddy. Sam's paddy got damaged by a pest. Luckily, Sam purchased insurance that comes with advice. Sam sends a picture of the damaged crop to an expert. The expert will review the picture and send Sam a personalized recommendation that can help Sam minimize the damage and improve yields. Sam will receive this advice directly into his phone. If despite all his efforts there is still damage to his paddy, the expert will use the pictures to determine how much the insurance payout should be. Sam will receive the insurance payout directly into his bank account. Now Sam has enough money to invest in the next season.
During the first year of this Scale Up Award, we are testing different use cases or distribution channels for the picture-based crop monitoring approach. This includes indexed insurance for cash crops in Haryana, in which the images are used to settle claims for visible crop damage. In Odisha, a digital crop registry is being developed that uses the images to assess a farmer's creditworthiness. And CABI's PlantWise program is using the images to offer extension to farmers in Tamil Nadu. We are measuring the cost effectiveness for each of these distribution channels during the monsoon season of 2019, which is just about to finish. So please stay tuned for results. As a next step, we are starting to partner with large-scale insurance schemes to assess the value of picture-based crop monitoring in their operations. This includes a partnership with India's crop insurance scheme to reduce reliance on crop cutting experiments for claim settlement. In Kenya, we are supporting Acre Africa's efforts to reach thousands of farmers by bundling insurance and advisories with seeds. And in Ethiopia, we are working with the World Food Programme to strengthen the insurance component of its R4 Rural Resilience Initiative. Partnerships are crucial in our work, so please do get in touch in case you see ways through which we can leverage each other's work and improve agriculture risk management at scale. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is David Bergmanson, and this session here is going to be talking about innovation pipeline and how do we finance it. So I'm joined by two colleagues here. We'll sit down here, and I'd also invite two of the 2018 awardees. We just saw them, Farm Inc. and Seeing is Believing, join us as well to have what I hope will be a robust and dynamic discussion around how do we finance innovation so that all these great ideas get out to serve society. And so I'm going to start by just having our panelists here briefly introduce themselves, and then we're going to dive into some questions. A little bit about myself as a start. My name is David Bergmanson. I'm the Chief Science Officer for a company called Aware. It develops weather products to serve smallholder farmers around the globe. Prior to that, I was with ICRISAT as the Director General. And prior to that, 8 years with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Hola, buenos días. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. My name is Ana Castillo, and I work at the Inter-American Development Bank, specifically at the IDB Lab, which is the innovation lab for the IDB group. And I have a background in agriculture engineer. Even my first job as an agriculture engineer was in the National Research Institute in Uruguay, in agriculture. In the last 3 years, we have been promoting from the IDB Lab the development of agtech ecosystems in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Hi, my name is Abhilash Sethi. I'm a principal at this agri-tech venture capital fund called Omnivore. We are the pioneer of agri-tech investments in India, been in operation since 2011. Also one of the earliest agri-tech focused funds in the geography, Southeast Asia. Right now we are investing from our fund 2, which is a $100 million fund. Raised our first fund in 2012, which was a $46 million fund. Total 150 million assets under management, invested in around 19 odd companies. We invest in companies very early at the seed, pre-series A level, and then scale them up to further rounds of investing and to make businesses throughout the country. So yeah, that's about Omnivore.
Morning, everyone. My name's Georgia Barry. I'm co-founder of Farm Inc. You already saw a pretty good intro of what we do in the video just then, but we won the 2017 Aspire Challenge and won the Scale Up Awards last year. Essentially what we are is we're a tech startup and we're building the learning hub for farmers. What we believe is that farmers are never going to download 50 different apps onto their phones. They're never going to understand 100 different tools. What we want to do is bring all of that together and be the place where farmers can register, tell us what they're doing, tell us what they're interested in, and then we recommend the tools and the services that are available to them.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Samyukta Kannan. I'm a researcher with the International Food Policy Research Institute, which is a CG organization, and I'm an economist by training. Our project, the Seeing is Believing project, won also the 2017 Inspire Challenge Award and the Scale Up Award last year. And I'm happy to talk more about our project as we go.
Okay, great. I will take note, I think this is one of the most diverse panels also. So congratulations, whoever organized that. want to just start with the first question directed to the investors. What do you see as your critical role in driving the innovation pipeline, shaping it, making sure it happens?
So when we started operations back in 2011, agri-tech investment was not that a norm in the industry. So it was, first of all, a very courageous step by the partners of the fund to come into a sector which was completely nascent. So the first fund, all the investment that we have done was like very early in their life cycle. So we have basically invested in people who were working out of their final year of undergrad, or a bunch of school friends come together working out of their garages to build something. We have invested in one company called Eruvaka, where the founder left his cushy multinational job, came back to India, visiting his village, saw that the aquaculture industry is not doing great. So he built a prototype and came to us for funding. So that was the kind of stage where we invested from our fund one.
Do you mentor these organizations to position them for success?
Yes, so it's not just about money or the funding when we say our stage. A lot of our time is spent along with the startups, along with the founders, and work as the employees of the company. We invest in very less amount of companies, and we try to go deep within the companies, become like the BD people for them, help them move from a startup to an organization. So when I say that, we believe that when we put in money, we tend to build some kind of structures in the organization, build teams in technology, finance, operations, and so on and so forth. Bring in mentors from outside who can help the startups move from a one product mindset to become a product, manufacturing, sales kind of an organization.
Okay, great, thanks. So Anna, to you, I mean, you're a very different type of organization, but just the same, also shaping innovation. So share with us your experience.
Well, we are a multilateral organization, and we play a role in investing through some VC funds in the region. I'm referring now to Latin America and the Caribbean, and we have done a few deals also as direct investments in the active field. This is sort of brand new for us. We have started during the last 3 years, when we started to meet in every forum or in accelerators, an increasing amount of people working on this field. And I would say that we have some criteria when we are looking at, I mean, we do it like all investments that are coming from the IDB lab as part of our social impact strategy, right? So we are looking for social and environmental return. Okay, so that's a key, yes, that's part of our role, right? And one of the criteria we manage is that we are addressing a well-defined unmet market. There are some areas, and I will specifically talk about some farm field solutions, that there is a lot of concurrencies. There is not a real value proposition coming from the startups, so we are really addressing those that have an extra value proposition. Also, very relevant, have a sufficient large and growing market, because I mean, that's niche markets are very hard to develop and increase. Obviously, I mean, you know, most agtechs are in a very early stage and they need time to mature, but at least we need to have a proof of concept and also be clear about the value proposition they are giving to the farmers. I mean, having a business case well built. And you have to be patient when investing in agtech, right? But also you need some returns. And something that I think is important for this audience is that we take much into consideration the team that is behind the startups, and the ability, I mean, and having a strong R&D area on the team is something very important for us.
So now I'm going to gauge everyone on this question. I'm interested to see hopefully the similarity of the response. All of you are familiar with the Cgiar and its global mandate, but what do you see as the CG's role in the innovation pipeline? And so I'm going to start with the scientists, and then let's see if there's continuity in that vision when we get to the investors.
So, I mean, just to give a brief background about how our how we got involved.
Let's stick to the question.
Yeah, sure. But basically, I mean, the reason the project came about, the innovation came about, that won the Inspire Challenge grant was kind of founded in some of our scientific work, some of our theory. You know, our research led us to find that there was a space in agricultural risk management where there could be potentially a solution where we can utilize smartphone camera data. And we pursued with that, and it's kind of come down to this point where we're actually trying to pass on the innovation to organizations that can take it to scale.
So the unique role of the CG, what in the innovation pipeline?
Right. So the CG institution, which kind of works on development funding, is really important in areas where the market. There may be a significant market barrier. So in insurance, for example, using plot level data to provide plot level loss assessment and payouts is not a risk that for-profit companies immediately want to take. So the development funding that we were able to receive as part of Cgiar enabled us to do the kind of proof of concept work, the ground truthing that was necessary to show that this methodology works. I think that was one significant contribution that we could provide as a CG organization. And another one that we are doing is actually evaluating the program. And this is something that IFPRI as an organization does quite extensively, is look at solutions and see whether they are achieving intended impacts. Innovations do abound in several, there are funding sources, people are reaching farmers, but are they reaching intended impacts? Are these impacts equally distributed across different sections of society? This is something that we are able to kind of research in a rigorous way. Right. That I would say is one of the contributions of CG.
So proof of concept and evaluation.
I think we have a slightly different perspective on this actually. So I'm a techie, I'm a software developer. I'm certainly not an expert in agriculture and don't intend to be. Where we see the role of the CG is that you guys are the experts. There's an incredible amount of knowledge even just sitting in this room. And for us, we're really interested in partnering with CG centers who have content, really good quality content that has been developed by the best researchers out there, but they don't know how to get that into farmers. They don't know how to translate that in a way that's meaningful for people on the ground. And that's what we want to do. So, in a slight plug, if you have content that you think is relevant to farmers and you don't know how to get it out to them, that's what we want to do. Please come and speak to us because we've essentially built an API for you to plug into what we've built and be able to, within a matter of a few weeks, get it into the hands of thousands of farmers.
So the message there, content provider, that's your expectation of the CGIAR.
I have 3 points to answer here, and I completely agree with Georgia when she said that this is a knowledge bank out here. And one thing that we see a lot while investing in startups is they have technology, but the product market fit is something that has to be validated. And if ICRISAT or Cgiar open itself up to the startups where they can come here and test their product into the market, get some feedback from the experts who are in-house, it can help a lot in developing the product market fit early in the game. Second is some amount of incubation, which anyways is happening here. We very closely work with iHub. Incubation does help a lot to the startups to come up to a stage where mainstream VCs can come in, angel investors can come in to take it to the next stage. And the third, I would say, is after even funding happens to the startups, ICRISAT should open itself up because the facilities available here are world-class. So let the startups come here, use those facilities, and evolve their product, innovate more, and have some, I don't know the terms exactly of engagement here, but have good terms where the startups can come here and open their technology up without fearing that IP infringement and stuff like that.
So a perfect pitch for iHub, basically. You did a great job. Anna, your perspective.
No, I absolutely agree with what's being said. I think entrepreneurs and startups are looking forward to have interaction with Cgiar, and I'm so glad that this topic is introduced in this kind of events. That, I mean, this is like a step forward on you know, on the relevance. I'm just going to tell you about the region I work, and you know, most innovations are coming from the private side, even though, I mean, the region invests a lot of money in R&D, both at the academic and the national research institutes, but that's a market failure, right? This is probably a controversial point, but some researchers feel that what they are producing is a public good. But I mean, I'm going to be a little bit rude about that. Is it a public good if it stays in the computer of the researcher, or just reach a small amount of farmers or agronomists? So I think the collaboration between entrepreneurs, startups, and the researchers can really make create impactful solutions for the farmers and for those that really need them. So that's a point that, I mean, probably it could change on the country perspective. I think Israel is an excellent example on how science and entrepreneur is combined. Even there are some programs at many United States universities that supports researchers with grants to move forward into development of new solutions, but that's not happening, at least in my region. So I think that's a very deep discussion that should happen, and I was very surprised to find it. I'm very happy to find here an incubator. I think this is an example to be followed by many others working on the R&D field.
Excellent. So all great points, different depending on your perspectives, and I think that's one of the challenges for the CGIAR. You know, they're trying to serve a global need, quite often market failures, obviously, with public resources. But then where can they better partner to scale up their innovation? And the iHub is one example of a vehicle to do that, and that's great. Which sort of leads me to the next question then. What are the gaps that need to be addressed that still remain for scaling up innovation? I really like your point, Anna. It's contextually different. You know, Latin America is different than Sub-Saharan Africa, different than South Asia. And so what are the gaps in each of these different contexts? And I guess at the risk of diluting things by generalizing, maybe two things. What is the general gap at a global level? And then sort of more closer to home, your own ecosystem or environment of operation, what do you see as a specific gap? Anyone can go. So,
sure. So at a very high level, I think the gap is we're still such a fragmented ecosystem, and I think we still don't have a good understanding yet of who sits where in this ecosystem and how those people link together. And I think we need to be careful when we talk about partnerships, for example, because to talk on a more localized scale, sometimes when people think partnerships, you know, they imagine long kind of MOUs and contracts and so on. Actually, I think the bigger issue is where are the APIs? Like, where is the kind of like really nice like open source stuff that, you know, people like us techies can just quickly and easily tap into? This doesn't even need to be a partnership. We don't even need to have ever spoken to them before, right? And you guys know how this works, aware, right? And I think that's happening more and more, and just having conversations this week has been really impressive, actually, the way that kind of change and that kind of like mindset shift is happening. But yeah, this is sort of a plea to all of you. You know, if you've got excellent data or you've got really great content, like, please put it out there, because, you know, people like us are desperate for it, and we're really, really interested to use it.
Okay, I like the British thing, mind the gap. So the data gap, great. And I'm going to be coming to the audience, and we don't have that text function working here, so I'm going to try to use Twitter to catch any questions, just to keep things moving. So there's a hashtag for the event, and you can use that, and I'll have a look for questions.
I completely agree with Georgia, actually, because we are looking for people to use the data that we've developed. And a lot of the development funding that comes to Cgiar comes with a mandatory requirement that it is made open source and that it is made available as a public good. So a lot of the algorithms and the source code for the applications that we develop are all available for others to use, and it's just that we haven't found the right partners to actually take it. And that kind of has forced us as a CG organization to look more at working with governments and with policy and with not-for-profit organizations as opposed to working with the industry. So some kind of platform where we can engage is really, I think, missing. We do put our data out there, but it's a question of how do you find it, and is there a single marketplace where we can interact with people from industry, and can funders also play a role in being part of that marketplace?
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting concept, a funding marketplace, where investors can meet with innovators to take opportunities to scale. So please, gaps.
Let me speak from an Indian point of view. We are seeing a lot of startups coming in the market linkage space, the trading platforms, and so on and so forth. We really want to see some core fundamental research-based startups in India, which is not happening that much. So we need the support from educational institutions and the research institutions to promote that. Second is, all the startups who are coming up in India are trying to raise venture capital money, which should not be the case, because the source of funding will depend on the kind of product that you are building. Venture capital is not for all. There are multiple different sources of funding available where you can still run and sustain your business. Third, I would say, is the problem of scale that David was mentioning. India specifically, as was discussed in the last panel as well, is a very fragmented market. Scale here is a different ballgame and a nightmarish ballgame altogether. So I would love to see the corporates who have been in this business for the past many decades to open up their system to some extent, without asking definitely for IPs and ownership and stuff, but to help the startups to reach certain scale, and maybe later on look at the startups based on what value do they bring onto the table to look at acquisitions and mergers and stuff like that.
Well, I'm going to add a couple more of what's not being said. First of all, I would like to remark that when you start from an idea to scaling up, this is an innovation trajectory, and you face different challenges, opportunities on this pathway. So I have to make clear that every stage has different challenges, and you have to keep them in mind. First of all, it doesn't matter whether you're piloting something is key, or you're focusing on a pilot. It's key to start thinking big, because pilots can have a very good demonstrative effect, but you have to have in mind the strategy. I mean, where you are seeing yourself in the future, right? And where that pilot can be scaled over time, even though you probably change your business model more than once in the time being, but you have to think big from the beginning. And second, it's almost the same point that he was raising, that is this is a fragmented market, so you have to be very clever to choose your allies, right? Trying to do marketing of solutions to each farmer is something very hard. So it's very useful to work with what we call aggregators of demand. That means cooperatives, farmers organizations, even large corporates that will help you to understand the problems and the needs of farmers, and also they can support you on the adoption process, which I think it's something crucial. So I think those would be my 2 cents.
Those are very valuable 2 cents. Learning about the private sector myself, educating the market is very expensive. And so when you're an innovator and you're breaking into address a gap, it's very hard educating the market. And your point about picking allies for scaling is really important. Partnerships are critical for success. And so thinking about, yes, that bold vision you have for the future, but who's going to help you along the way? Really, really practical points that you bring up. So thank you. I don't see any questions coming from Twitter. Now, and I'm not a social media mogul, but I think, know how I can find them.
Maybe we can ask the audience a question.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm trying to do, because the microphone system doesn't seem to work very good out in the audience. But if you can stand, if you have a question, hopefully there's a microphone that can find you.
Or I have a question for you. How many times have you heard about this amazing innovation that is struggling to scale up? And any of you have thoughts why this is happening? I mean, why these innovations aren't scaling the way they should?
Yeah, no, that's great. I don't mind delegating the moderation here. I think there's a science to scale, and actually I think that's something the CG should be taking on a lot more. Thinking very innovatively around how do you scale science, the financing, but actually, VC financing, thinking out of the box. iHub was an attempt to do that, and I think it's in itself learning how to do it, but I think it's a bold and needed approach. I think the other CG centers should take that up. I think also there's a need for behavior change in the Cgiar. Sitting on a lot of intellectual assets, but as you point out, Anna, that's a public good, and if it doesn't reach the farmer, Norman Borlaug said, you can't eat potential. Well, you also can't access knowledge that's locked away. So how do we, use innovation? How do we use modern IT systems to get that knowledge out at an accelerated pace, and not only getting the knowledge out, but getting the feedback of what are the requirements of farmers and other value chain actors that can benefit from innovation. So it's a feedback loop to make the science even more relevant, and in the process getting it out to consumers, be it farmers, be it value chain actors. So those are some of my own observations over time.
Just to chip in a little bit on that one, I think one of the issues is that we're framing the question wrong. So what we're saying is, how do we scale this innovation? The scale part should be part of the innovation, right? And if you haven't built in a distribution mechanism for your innovation, it's not going to work, right? So rather than thinking, how do we scale this innovation, like how do we develop an innovation that scales, right? So for us, what was really important is that we build social communities around the products and the services that we create. And we were able to scale, across Africa to around 20 different countries in Africa through that social process, so through word of mouth, through those forums. And that was like a critical part of the innovation that we developed. So I think it's really important that we don't separate the distribution mechanism from the innovation.
So one of the questions behind us here is we see artificial intelligence being used for cotton and paddy, and why not other commodities? I think it's the demand of the marketplace is sort of one response to that. But to your point, Georgia, I don't think we should be divorcing technology from the needs on the ground. And I think that's actually the risk we're running right now. We've got all these great tools and technologies without understanding the context of what solution actually needs to be delivered. I think that's a really important thing, that human-centered design of how we apply technology to serve smallholder farmers. So that's, I guess, a response to the question behind us on the AI, is that we need to understand the context, and that includes the market demand for these tools.
And also make, which was raised in the previous panel or the videos we saw, make the user experience very easy. I mean, it has to be quite similar to what they are used to, the type of extension they are used to get. I know many very good innovations, but they are very hard to be understood, and they need a lot of support, so the efficiency that this support to be given, so that I completely agree on the user experience and human-centered design, and that's why we need to bring more people from these different disciplines into the conversation. We need to bring designers, we bring people from the creative arts, we need to bring people from anthropologists, sociologists, I mean, obviously sure. Data scientists and you know, people from technology, but also bring some other disciplines to the conversation.
Okay, great. So I'm seeing some questions behind us here around transparency and trust. Let's need to be public-private partnerships. I would say producers, the farmers themselves, need to be a part of that partnerships, as well as the policymakers. Sam, you brought that up a little bit. You know, let's not leave the policymakers behind in this conversation. They actually can create the enabling environment and need to create the enabling environment, not so much in the form of funding, but just in policies that, you know, ensure trust is not betrayed as we use these new technologies to serve farmers. You know, making sure that technology, yes, is used responsibly. I know here in the case of India, while I was Director General, we had a hard time getting drones to be regulated and used, you know, so a diverse range of issues that policymakers can actually take on and support this wonderful ecosystem and making sure that we unlock the potential of innovation. Thoughts, more thoughts or questions?
On the public-private side, I think many of our developing countries have extension services coming from, I mean, being paid by or state-run. That's a great opportunity to start introducing this AgTech technology. My feeling is that extensionists are not so aware on what's going on in the innovation field. So we need to get them educated. And also I'm going to tell you experience in Israel. Israel is doing this kind of meetups between startups and farmers to try to find what opportunities there are, what business opportunities they have, and they are piloting a first program that is giving grants for those that are adopting new AgTech technologies. So that's, we have to learn from the leaders.
Yeah, innovation comes from all over the place, and Israel's a great example of how they've created that ecosystem.
And regarding this public-private partnership, there is a lot happening in India. From my past experience when I was with a corporate in India called Mahindra, and we have Dr. Rabi Sahu here from IAR. I have very closely worked with him, who represents the government, me from corporate, and we had worked with a few startups to come up with technology for orchard farmers in India. So it's all about how do you structure this whole partnership together to see that value is created for all the stakeholders involved and also for the farmers. I think if that is sorted, then public-private partnerships is not that difficult anymore in India.
So a few questions rolling up there around funding scaling. And clearly, the technologies we're talking about at this event are a key instrument to support scaling. In and of themselves, they're not the solution, but they can deliver the intent and the solution at scale and an accelerated pace. And so, maybe some thoughts around how do we better finance scaling innovation? I mean, you two are examples of scaling innovation, but how can that be done better? Can it be done faster? Can it be done more efficiently? Can it be done more effectively? And actually, how do we help researchers make pitches to do what I'm just asking you to do?
Yeah, absolutely. At the risk of repeating stuff that has been discussed before, I think partnerships are key to scale, especially if you're looking at multi-sectoral approaches, which tend to abound in agriculture. But making those partnerships or linking with prospective partners is something that I think scale financing should also try to provide or try to.
So should that be terms of the financing, is to make sure you have good partnerships at the beginning?
Yeah, I suppose. But scale necessarily comes with its own challenges, which require rethinking partnerships all the time. And that's something that we have confronted even during our scale-up progress over the last 1 year. On the, just from the research side, I have a question to the funders because, as researchers, probably as a naive researcher, we tend to talk a different language, and our knowledge products are usually in terms of papers or products, project notes or, reports, things like that, and a lot of it just sticking to data. What kind of knowledge products would you like to see from research organizations that you think startups or partners that you work with, other stakeholders can actually use easily?
Thank you for asking that question. So, as I said earlier, as a fund, we want to go in as early as possible. And one point I wanted to bring in for scale is it's definitely about partnerships, but the first most crucial thing that we look for at scale is the team. It is always, innovation is just one aspect to it. Innovation to scale needs a very strong team, which is segregated where, manufacturing, supply chain, sales, marketing, everything comes into the picture. And when you said, if we are interested, if the funders are interested, definitely yes. If there is a very strong idea where there is a scale potential to it, funders are interested. They just want to see a team which is capable of executing it. And if these two things are in place, then funders in India are now becoming bold enough to take that very early bets.
So one of the questions that's rolling up here is around indigenous innovation. So whoever put that question up, I encourage you to meet up with the investors here after the event and give your pitch. Anna. We're wrapping up.
Yes, just to wrap up, I think it's about capital, but it's also about smart capital, which means that your investor must bring not only money, but which I think is the main asset is knowledge of the market, networking, good relationships, an understanding of trends. So that's also a very important, a relevant part besides money. I think money, maybe if you have a good idea, someone will finance you, but you have also to do your due diligence when you are a startup or an innovator, and try to find, what the financer is bringing to you. And what kind of extra, besides money, what he's delivering.
So that is the perfect segue to what I have to say as wrapping up here. You're right. It's not just about money. It's about your human capital, your networks to make things happen, your understanding of the marketplace. One of the things that was brought up was in the previous panel was also the absence of data. And so our contribution, not financial, but in kind, is to unlock weather data for Africa and South Asia that we're announcing here and now, to make geospatial weather data available to really drive and understand the market opportunities. When we started the Innovation Hub here at ICRISAT, all the entrepreneurs wanted access to easily consumed weather data to understand the marketplace, to even integrate into their products and services, and it wasn't available. We've got all this data out there, but it's not consolidated, vetted, and accessible. So that's our commitment as Aware, is to respond to this global challenge that was put out a month ago around Adapt Our World by Bill Gates and Ban Ki-moon. So we're going to do our part to that call to action, and I would invite all of you to do the same in your own respective fields. I want to thank all the panelists for a diverse conversation here. Thanks to the questions that were posted up on the board, and I encourage you to make your pitch after the event around financing innovation. Thank you all.
All right, let's have another round of applause for our lovely panelists. Thank you. So, obviously, I'm sure many of you have heard about this little joke called Indian Standard Time, where everything always starts 2 hours after the time that's written. So since we did start late today, I want to let you all know that we will be going directly into our next set of panels, and then we will be breaking for lunch at 12 o'clock. So hang tight, we've got 2 more amazing panels for you all. And at this point, I want to go ahead and invite our next set of panels on building enabling environments. So let's go ahead and have our panelists for holding back collective action and scaling of ag research for development innovations. Can we have a round of applause?
Testing. Hi everyone. Thank you for the perseverance. I know it's not easy to stay for a back-to-back session, and but I'm glad. Hopefully we'll be able to catch you up to time. My name is Rodrigo Sara. I'm an IP lawyer working as a consultant with the Big Data platform, and introducing today this double-barreled session on building enabling environments. And we've had a slight change in the order of the presentations for reasons that will become apparent in due course. But we are focusing on what is holding back collective action and scaling of agricultural research for development innovations. And that will be followed on by another panel looking at innovation places and processes chaired by Kelly Wong. So just to provide some very quick context, I think we all agree, and we hear repeatedly, that agricultural research for development struggles to scale innovations intended to reach smallholder farmers. And not just farmers, but cooperatives, small to medium enterprises, etc., in emerging markets. And in an effort to better understand these constraints, I've been working with the Big Data platform to reach out across the agri-food ecosystem to hear from stakeholders, from impact investors to established private sector companies to startups, a whole range of actors. And there's clear consensus that the world needs new, expansive alliances to tackle issues, intractable issues, such as biodiversity loss and climate change. And yet, we're still not there. We're still getting critical mass in collective action is proving elusive. We wanted to use this session to actually give everybody a chance to hear perspectives from across the ecosystem. And listening to the panel before us, I think you've already heard some very interesting perspectives from across the ecosystem. So we're hoping to complement those. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel. We have Christian Merth, a senior advisor at GIZ. We have Madhu Jain, a India country director at Precision Agriculture for Development, and Abhilash Sethi, principal at Omnivore, who is kindly stepping in for his colleague, Shruti Srivastana, who appears on the program but unfortunately couldn't make it today. And Abhilash he's holding a back-to-back session, so thank you so much for this little marathon we're putting you through. I won't steal their thunder because I've asked each panelist to give us 5 to 10 minutes of insights to explain where in the ecosystem they sit, if and how they interact with agricultural research for development organizations like Cgiar, and to give us some perspectives and insights on some key issues. I invite Christian to commence, to share his perspectives, and here are some of the issues that they may be speaking to are up on the board, so you can follow. Christian?
Hello? Yeah, thanks a lot, Rodrigo. I would like to introduce GIZ as an organization very quickly and then talk a little bit about where we are in the ecosystem and how we see the interaction with ag research for development and where we see constraints for scaling and adoption of these early solutions. GIZ is a German government-owned company looking into international cooperation. We are very decentralized in more than 120 countries with more than 21,000 employees, most of them local staff. And we sort of think we have a competitive advantage or a unique selling proposition with our field presence and our close government relationships. We work together not only with governments, we work together with businesses, civil society organizations, research organizations. So multi-stakeholder models is a part of our DNA. Whatever we do, it requires a partnership approach, a consortium approach. And that also defines a little bit our position in the ecosystem. So what we do is usually we coordinate and implement these large-scale value chain interventions. And again, multi-stakeholder engagement by design. We have our own management system called Capacity Works that we apply to these kind of interventions. Examples include, for instance, the Cgiar initiative mostly in West Africa, the Sustainable Smallholder Agribusiness Initiative, Better Rice Initiative in Asia, and also our Green Innovation Centers, which is on its own a 450 million euro investment by the German government across 15 countries. We usually go for more mature solutions at scale. I think that's what we have a good reputation for. So we often have impact objectives to reach hundreds of thousands of farmers. So Cgiar, for instance, reached 420,000 farmers so far. The Sustainable Smallholder Agribusiness reached 500,000 farmers, mainly in West Africa. And we often also transfer concepts like the farmer business schools that we have developed in one of the initiatives. We have applied these concepts to other initiatives and reached more than 1 million farmers already on that. I think in India, just to mention an example, in India we have been part of the Climate Change Knowledge Network in Indian agriculture, where we also co-developed a platform for multimodal extension services called NICE SSM. I think we can do better in terms of data collection and data usage in these initiatives. I think we're very good in collecting what is often referred to thick data, contextual, deep dive information like farmer diaries. We capture data on household socioeconomics, we capture data on agricultural practices, yield, and the like. But we don't have large quantities. Typically, out of these hundreds of thousands of farmers we reach, we only collect data from a few hundreds, mainly for M&E purposes. But we also look into ag innovations and applying and experiment with new data sources and technologies. So recently we have experimented with AI-driven crop type masking and yield estimation for tree crops, in this case in cashew, utilizing our own data for machine learning. And we also engaged with Cgiar as part of a 10-year support of the German government called Advisory Service on Agricultural Research for Development. So if it comes to key constraints for scaling and adoption, I think it's best to look maybe at a concrete example. I've mentioned the farmer business schools reaching more than 1 million farmers. We have, as part of an innovation challenge that we ran with local solution providers and startups, we support a company called AgroInnova based in Ghana, and they have developed an application that digitizes these farmer business school content. So they provide functionality on advisory, they provide functionality on a cropping calendar to guide the farmer throughout the season, what to do when, and they provide so-called money in, money out application that allows them basically to do their financial management, have a balance sheet of investments and the return on that investment. And after 1.5 years of implementation and piloting, I think they are now at the stage where they're facing issues that are very common to many of these early stage digital for ag solutions. And they, by the way, also very nicely summarized by the most recent market study by CTA and Dahlberg in Sub-Saharan Africa, including issues like funding for scaling these early pilots. I think the Inspire challenge is an exception here, that they also look into scaling initial ideas. I think we're missing that on a broader scale. Impact measurement to really correlate and standardize the way how we measure impact between these digital agricultural solutions and the productivity increases that we see. We don't have a good startup ecosystem in digital for ag. Maybe in India it's looking pretty good, but I think in Sub-Saharan Africa we're missing that piece to incubate, to accelerate, to access private equity, venture capital. And also the market intelligence piece. These companies and startups, they struggle to see where to go and how to go to market. And what is the addressable market and the business model they can go for. So I think good practices on business models are missing as well. So talking to these guys from Ghana, I gave them 9 recommendations, and that's my last shot for starting the discussion for today. I think first of all, you need to plan for an idea to product cycle of 5 to 6 years. So it takes time. It's not that after 1 year you can make money with your early stage applications. I think you should be aware, secondly, to sooner or later that the low-hanging fruits come to an end. Technology and piloting is the low-hanging fruit. Business case development and go-to-market is the high-hanging fruit, and that's not easy. We've heard a lot of adoption. I think this is still the currency where we measure success, and I think this conference is a good example. Whenever we have a pitch, we tend to ask how many farmers have you reached, so that's really key. Business case and business modeling, you should really invest into exercises like a business model canvas, looking into your value proposition, your customer segmentation, the channels that you want to use, and the relationships you have to go for with your customers and the like. And the fifth would be really be extreme with your customer orientation. The customer is really king. Look for the opportunities out there, and they might be surprising, and you come up with first adopters that you haven't thought about. 6 would be to reach out and show your beauty and value. So I think you need to be very clear on your storytelling, the elevator pitch, be professional in your design of the application. There is quite some competition out there already. In Sub-Saharan Africa, we have about 400 digital ag solution providers. So that's another thing. You're not alone. You learn from others, exchange, and see how they cope with the market. Last but not least, make noise and work out louder. I think it's not everybody's business, but get on the stage, try to be awarded, be recognized, be on the press. If you want to see investment in your early ideas, you need to go for this kind of public relationships. And last but not least, attract more capital and plan for it. The first grant might take you 2 or 3 years, but then you should plan in terms of your deliverables upfront, that you have a clear business plan in place at the end of the first grant to be prepared for the next stage of getting investments. I think that's my take for the moment.
Thanks, Christian. So from a governmental organization that invests in scaling, we hear business case, business case, business case, and so that's amongst other recommendations, and that's a good transition to move to the private sector and hear what Madhu's perspectives are.
Hello. Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I'll start off by briefly introducing what Precision Agriculture for Development, or PAD, does, and then walk into the different agenda points that have been laid down for the session. So PAD essentially provides customized agricultural advisory to farmers in developing economies. We are a global social enterprise, and we do this by using human-centered design, big data, behavioral economics, and social learning theory. Much of the PAD's work has been inspired by our co-founders, Professor Sean Cole and Michael Kramer, who did RCTs, or randomized control trials, in African and Indian context to understand that how does digital agricultural extension leads to increase in yields, incomes, and adoption of better practices. And when we saw statistically significant results on all those parameters, PAD was co-founded in the year 2016, starting in Kenya and India, and since then we have scaled to 7 countries across the world. We reach close to 3 million farmers, over 600,000 farmers in India in 6 states. So one, I think if I talk about where exactly do we sit in the ecosystem, we are researchers as well at one spectrum, one end of the spectrum, wherein we have economists, researchers who are working towards understanding what really works for the farmers on the ground, how to really create those behavioral nudges which can lead to large-scale impact. And then at the other end, we also use those learnings to scale to large-scale projects across developing economies, like I gave you the example of India as well. Our experience has been that if you want to reach scale, operating in isolation is not the key. You really need to find the right set of partners who can create that enabling ecosystem wherein you can bring different synergies together and different capabilities together to reach out to the farmers in an impactful manner. So I'll give you one example of the state of Odisha, wherein we have been working for the last 2 years. We did a pilot in the state of Odisha to understand, first of all, whether there is a demand for an agricultural advisory service or not. And we ran this pilot for a period of 6 to 7 months, and we saw that the engagement rates in terms of listening to content, picking up the calls, as well as asking questions was tremendous. We reached out to the government post that, and the government was really interested in signing our MOU to reach to a scale of 1 to 2 million farmers. But we also understood that we bring certain capability in terms of understanding how to deliver content and measure the impact, but we are not the content creators. We are not the agronomists. We don't have a long team of agronomists doing field trials to understand what really works and doesn't work for the farmers in terms of agronomic practices. That's when we reached out to several Cgiar institutions, such as CIMIT. They also have a CRP called Cereal Rice Intensification Program called CISA, which has been running for the last 8 to 9 years, and CIMIT as well individually. And we saw that for the last 8 to 9 years, they've been conducting very rigorous research on the ground and have come up with a set of practices that really works for the farmers. But being an academic research organization, there was not a clear path to scale as to how to really deliver that content to the people for whom it was actually created. So we created a partnership along with these individual institutions, and we work along with International Rice Research Institute as of today to scale up their rice crop manager and reach out to the farmers with plot-based fertilizer recommendations, which are much more better than the general recommendations which are provided through the universities. In addition, we have also worked with CISA on understanding what are the best practices in terms of, for example, time of establishment in case of paddy, which can lead to highest yields, while also enabling an ecosystem wherein you don't have to use high amount of inputs, and hence helping them increase their not just yields but also incomes at the same time. And this is something which the example that I gave was closer home in India, but this is the same approach that we have also sort of identified in another geography in Africa, Ethiopia. In Ethiopia as well, we are now working with several partners such as Digital Green, Awazde, to form a cohort of the right set of people who can bring in technology. We bring in the A/B testing and iterative approach to product development and understanding what really creates those behavioral nudges for the farmers on the ground. And Digital Green brings in their experience in video and other modes of dissemination to reach out to the farmers. And the idea is again to scale the solution to millions of farmers collaboratively. So I think, as I started saying, that collaboration and having the right set of partners with the right intent remains the key as far as scaling solutions is concerned, rather than restricting to publications or academic research, is what our experience has been. I'll now transfer it back to Sarah.
Thanks, Madhu. So to hear the private sector call on collaboration, and here we've seen that they work very closely with CGIAR centers, so very much the principles of synergy that were described. And now we move on to Abhilash and hear his perspectives.
I think the last line, Madhu, what you said was just absolutely the nail on the coffin, the final. So it's what we discussed in the last panel as well. The innovation happens at the research institutes, which is very critical for any new thing to come up. But that innovation will have to be executed properly by another set of team is where we are focused on. And because of which, what I feel is a big constraint to the scaling up is because that execution part sometimes is missing when innovation happens here. Now, at Omnivore, many of our portfolio companies, they keep on reaching out to all the research institutes of India, ICRISAT, IARI, to use them as part of their R&D exercise, to use some of the facilities in here, to use some of the existing researches which is already done and see how they can incorporate it. But somehow the whole SOP is not present here. How to take that innovation out of this this compound and incorporate that into organization and then make a business out of it. There is no clear SOP which is currently laid out. And that is predominantly because the way, I can say from an Indian perspective, the way India has grown in terms of research and education. These have been two separate streams since independence. And there are a separate bunch of very good educational institutes where research doesn't happen, and there are a few set of very good research institutes where practical application of that research doesn't happen, which Madhu said. So all the research that happens in India somehow ends up being in a paper, right? It doesn't get onto the fields. In the last 1 decade or so, we are seeing the mainstream educational institutes, they are focusing a lot of research being guided by the apex research institutes of India like IARI, ICR, and a bunch of crop research institutes. All the IITs, we are seeing a bunch of researches are happening in collaboration with IARI. And from there, small companies are now being formed. Very, very nascent stage right now, but we are hoping that in the next 3 to 4 years, we can see some major companies with good fundamental research start coming out from these campuses. And what we are seeing in the startup program of Cgiar as well, it's a very innovative way of not just letting the researchers take the job of starting a company, but it has to be a collaboration or a team rather, that there has to be someone who is good in technology, but there has to be people who are good in management as well, like the MBS sort of, who know how to manage the supply chain, who know how to do manufacturing if it is a product company, who know how to do the marketing and then take the product out into the market. And once this whole structure is formed, then it is very easy to scale, at least to do a pilot and then showcase this whole prototype, the whole business model as Christian was mentioning, to then come to an institutional investor to ask money for. Just with innovation might be difficult from an Indian point of view to raise money, but you need to have this team, have this business model, go-to-market strategy in place to make that thing happen. And historically, because the major research has been done by the government institutions, they always have this very socialistic approach to everything. So research, it has to be proliferated to the farmers, free of cost and stuff like that. And the connotation was if it goes to a corporate, there is always a profit motive to it, and it might demean the life of the farmers and stuff like that. But the way the digital world has moved, it's not the case. If you look at the go-to-market strategy of all the startups right now, earlier pricing used to be a perception-based pricing, like cost plus, value-based, and perception. Many of the old companies out there are still going with a perception-based pricing. Like they try to figure out what is the maximum premium that the brand can charge and try to get the money in. But the startups who are coming up, all of them are going for value-based pricing. So the concept of getting more value out of the farmers than giving them back is not there anymore. All the startups that I see, the way they do their pricing is, if I am giving $100 of benefit to the farmers, I should get $30 back and let $70 stay with the farmers. And that is how pricing is being set, which is a very effective way of pricing the products that I am seeing. In terms of PPP next, so coming to the first question, so scaling, I think innovation surrounded by a very strong team would be a first major step for doing the scaling, with having very good business model and the go-to-market strategies. For PPP, I see, I've already discussed in my last panel as well that PPP is becoming easy in India now. The way this government is working, the way the educational institutes are slowly opening up. I closely work with IARI, and they are so receptive to startups right now. They are willing to open up their technologies to the startup, give it to them so that they can try it out, because they are slowly realizing that it's so complex going out there and doing everything together. You cannot do that. You have to believe in the system of innovative ecosystems rather than doing everything on your own. So partnerships is becoming very key now. Very recent initiative by the government of India under DARE, which is Department of Agriculture Research Extension, I think. They have started this thing called Agri-Innovate. So in which they have collaborated all the research that has happened in all the agriculture research institutes in India into one platform. And anybody, like you, me, any startup can go up there, find out what research they want to get a license for, and they can directly buy it from there. So it's a licensing with a time scale to it, and everything is done. So I think these kind of initiatives are very interesting going forward for the startups to scale and to innovate. From a VC point of view, we feel that this is democratizing the entire research that is out there. but we also feel that that might take away the competitive edge to some extent. So once you get the research, there has to be some more amount of additional layer being developed on top of it so that the competitive edge stays and the companies can then become profitable. So that's how we from a VC lens are seeing this whole industry coming up in terms of scale from agri-research development and research organizations.
Thank you. That was also quite interesting. We hear collaboration again. I mean, I think this is, everyone's underscoring just how important that is. But we heard something new, which is really the looking at the core team. So before looking at the partnership intentions, is that the right team to scale? And I guess that makes sense coming from a VC perspective. The other interesting addition there was the technology, really exposing what you have in terms of a clear offer, a technology including licensing terms, and it sounds like the Indian government is stepping in to actually facilitate that for the research space in India. And I'm trying to move to the next slide. Just bear with me. Oh, here we go. So thank you for your perspectives on the ecosystem. I think that gives us a little bit of context where each panelist is coming from. I take this moment to share the Menti code. So if you have questions, we can crowdsource them and we can use them to lead the discussions. We ran over time. The previous session ran over time, so we're trying to keep this one to time. So we've got about another 10, 15 minutes left. And while we're crowdsourcing questions, I'm just going to put to the panelists. So in your perspective, and just an initial reaction, so now that, I mean, it seems like you have a sense of what the constraints are. You each have examples of potential solutions or instances in which those constraints have been addressed. So in this space, what does an enabling ecosystem look like? And what's the low-hanging fruit? What should our top priorities be in the immediate term to achieve it? So if there's anything specific that comes to mind while we're sourcing questions, please do share. And this is quite open, so no specific structure.
Maybe I can start. I think it all starts with better coordination first. I mean, we know that the ecosystem for scaling and investing into these early solutions is still sort of missing, and it's mainly donor funded and not really privately driven. So coordination between donor funded programs is a good starting point to look for synergies and don't duplicate work. And then in terms of the matchmaking, I think we can be intermediaries to really bring together these unusual partnerships that are necessary to bridge from early ideas to go to market. Like Mathur is saying that they are now doing this intervention in Ethiopia where it's still donor funded, but they brought together different players from research to ultimate solution providers in the long term with a clear business perspective. I think that's really necessary. And then I think that the market intelligence piece is something that is desperately needed. I really like these early studies that look into the digital for ag space and just give first estimations and numbers, and they are hard to get. But what is really the addressable market? How many farmers have been digitally registered already? What are the segments of smallholders? There is no such thing like the smallholder. There are different segments that you need to look into from a service perspective, be it cash value chains or food crops. So government services that may have a totally different target group than private sector interventions. Yeah, and then maybe shared learning is something that we could also facilitate, really to, I'm part of a donor group looking into AI and got to know, for instance, of a curricula from NetHope that they have developed together with MIT. Those kind of capacity building is something we can put our efforts together and then also have case studies to be published and available and accessible to these early startups.
Thank you. And Madhu?
Yeah, I think the point that I would like to emphasize on is closer to what Christian emphasized also. That I think there has to be a structure as to how the capital is being utilized, which is there, either for social impact or for creating business models as well. So for example, the states that we work in India, and I'll speak more about India since I work here mostly, we see that there are multiple extension systems running, both private and public. And I think the farmers' trust has gone down as to which advice they should follow and which one would work for them or not work for them. So how to converge the efforts of all the ecosystem players who are working together, rather than having multiple systems working out for them in silos, I think is one critical area to gain trust as well as to make the best use of the money which is available for these purposes. The second is, I would say, what the theme of this conference also has been, like big data. Cgiar has come up with the Guardian ecosystem as a tech platform. So something like that which can enable researchers, data scientists, as well as private practitioners to come together and make use of the data or the information which is available to reach out to the farmers in an impactful manner. I think such kind of ecosystems, while taking in feedback and iterating onto the platform based on different players who are operating, both from the business perspective as well as social impact perspective, I think holds the key to the future if we want to scale up solutions in an impactful manner while remaining financially sustainable.
So Madhur, it's interesting because you've actually touched upon a theme that is appearing in the questions that we have. So we're being asked, how can we make business models for the bottom 10% without it being exploitation? Also, we talk about a collaborative action or discussion, and what's between multi-stakeholders, and what's the focus? Is it social welfare or profit? And so this concept of trust, I think, is central, is the answer, anticipating those questions. And you've given us a little bit of insight into how you might go about engendering trust. And I guess I heard communication, but maybe some examples. What kind of communication? What do you think will actually? Because what kind of communication is effective to engender trust?
Yeah. So I don't have a very clear answer to that, but I can speak about a few themes that we are exploring as an organization right now in respect to some of these questions that have been asked. So there is one question over here which talks about how do we really create a business model if you really want to reach out to the poorest of the poor, which is like the bottom 10% in terms of incomes. So we started off providing service for free in collaboration with our partners, but now we have realized that after having reached to a certain scale and having huge amounts of data for 600,000 farmers in India itself, there are a lot of business models that can be made out of it. So we can work with agri-input providers, we can go for advertisement route, for which we have been approached by many agri-input providers till date. But the biggest question that comes in from the research team is that if we go down that route, how do we maintain the trust and not end up becoming another service that just provides advertisements and not really deliver value, even though we are providing valuable service and information to them. So what we have done, we are trying to do this in a very systematic manner, wherein we have picked up one of the states and are working with 2 to 3 input providers and are designing advertisement in a manner so that it goes out to the farmer at a smaller scale. And then we are trying to learn from the data that farmers who are getting access to those advertisements, are we seeing lesser listening rate or lesser pickup rates? The ratings that they are providing at the end of every message on a scale of 1 to 5, is it going down for that particular sample? To understand that first of all, what should be the design of the message so that there is no trust deficit that is built into the system in a service that we've been delivering, while also ensuring the financial sustainability of the system as well that we've been running while scaling to much larger population than we are right now. That's one. Secondly, also as a secondary business model, we are also looking at charging farmers now, at least for the variable cost or the marginal cost which is incurred in reaching out to each user. So we have started to do this in Karnataka with coffee farmers, not with paddy farmers in Odisha till date, to be very clear on that. And we have seen that 60% of the farmers are actually ready to pay for the service. And we have actually collected money from them as a proof of concept as well. But the question again comes in from the research team that if we go down this route, we may end up not touching the poorest of the poor who might remain secluded from the service. So one thing which we are again trying out in collaboration with Coffee Board of India, can we try out a differential model of pricing wherein we have different products available. There is a premium category and there is a standard category available, and if someone wants to get access to much more information, they access the premium category and pay for it. And the money that we make out of it is helpful in reaching out to the poorest of the poor on the basic major practices that needs to be followed throughout the crop cycle. So these are some of the ideas we've been exploring. We'll be happy to share them once we learn more. Thank you.
Yeah, for the same question, the bottom 10% pyramid, I'd like to give a couple of examples here from our portfolio companies. See, it's never one size fits all. So if a farmer is not getting value from the services that is being provided, he or she will stop using it, as clear as that, right? So we need not have to just focus on that. How can we go and target those 10% of the bottom of the pyramid farmers? But coming back to our portfolio, there is one company called Dehat, which is working in a quite deep-rooted manner in the eastern part of India, in states of Bihar and the bordering areas of Uttar Pradesh as well. Majority of their farmer base are small landholders, farmers with having 1 acre of farms or even less than that. So what they have done is they have used a village-level entrepreneur kind of a model. They have set up their own nodal centers, and under that nodal centers, they have allotted village-level entrepreneurs and supported them with some kind of a finance through some financial agency to set up their own shops, which are called Dehat centers. Now these Dehat centers, they provide end-to-end support to the farmers in terms of providing them inputs, providing advisory for growing certain crops, and also buy the produce from them with a guarantee to sell this to their pre-identified buyers. So when they have created this whole ecosystem, the small landholder farmers are getting benefited. And because these farmers are now getting onto a phygital platform, a physical and digital platform, their records are now coming on in a more digital manner, which earlier was not there. Now, any kind of growth, we all live in a capitalistic economy, right? Any kind of growth is because of credit, right? When credit goes into the system, either if it is equity, debt, then only the growth happens, which the small landholder farmers never had access to. The only extra money that they used to get is the profit that you used to earn from the revenues minus cost part. They never used to get extra funding from somewhere. Now, when this kind of transactions are recorded, now the finance companies are knowing that, okay, this farmer is earning 20,000 rupees an acre and year. So slowly the finance companies, the fintech meets agtech, the first sort of panel that we had today in the morning. So now the finance companies are now coming up, giving small amount of loans to the farmers, and whereby the farmers are now able to buy better seeds, better chemicals, and their productivity is increasing. So the cycle is then becoming larger and larger. Another example, if I can take, there's a company called Stellapps, which is into dairy IoT, doing very similar kind of a work across India. They capture milk from almost a couple of million farmers in India every day. Again, very small farmers having 1 cattle, 2 cattle, they come to the collection centers, drop their milk in. Earlier, there was no transaction record of these milk exchange that used to happen. Now, using Stellapps' digital platform, all these transactions are now recorded. And they have tied up with some mainstream banks of India, where the banks are realizing that, okay, this farmer is a good farmer, is pouring in this much amount of milk daily, they have got this many amount of cows, so let me give some loan to that farmer so that he can buy 1 more cattle. And thereby, we have seen farmers with having couple of cows 2 years back who are now owning around 8 to 10 cows. So that's how the growth is now coming up, with small amount of digital intervention, with some benefits being provided to the farmers, and little amount of that benefit being taken back by the company, and then more financial inclusion, as Madhur was also mentioning. That whole cycle gets completed and benefits is coming to the bottom of the pyramid.
We've got some, I guess, some contradictory comments that have come up in the discussions. And so, on the one hand, we're being told, don't measure yourself by your publications, right? You've got to go further. We're being told, don't measure yourself by adoption numbers. What you need is a business, not just a business plan, but a business model. And at the same time, the questions that we're getting are pointing out that actually there are other kinds of constraints. There's a lot of fragmentation of land and problems with title deeds. So issues that really only government can resolve, not business. We've got people pointing out that although business to business might be profitable in this space, business to farmer is not. So how can you make a business model? How can you solve a scaling? How can you look at monetization where your target customer may not be able to afford a product? So how do we overcome these kind of inherent tensions? And I mean, to me, it's quite surprising to hear Christian's example of these farmer business schools where they've got adoption, they've got 1 million people using these products, and yet they're still scratching their heads trying to figure out repeat user and monetization issues. And so how can we actually address, how do we resolve these particular tensions? Is there a secret sauce?
Yeah, I think it's really a question of structure and formality that we need to bring into the value chains. I mean, the land management issues that have been mentioned is also an obstacle and informality that is providing insecurity and non-predictive business. Basically, if you invest into such issues, you can never be sure that there is a certain customer base, or each value chain is different. Agriculture is so much fragmented. It's a multi-stakeholder game. You could have these B2G, B2F, B2B models, depending really on the use case. So you have to be really distinctive and decisive. And of course, because of the low margin, we all struggle to make money or profit unless we reach the numbers, right? Even, I mean, if you deal with data without the numbers that provide data, you can't realize that kind of business model. So I think structure, formality, and customization, depending on the value chain, those are the secret recipe to get to the next stage.
Well, we've got a lot more questions on the board. I'd love to have the time to tackle some more, but we simply don't. We want to make sure the next panel has sufficient time. So thank you to our panelists, and please join me in thanking our panelists.
All right, one more panel and then we've got lunch. And then after lunch, we've got a lot of breakouts and the best part, which is the Inspire pitches. So we're almost there before we can get food. But next up, I'd like to introduce Kelly Wong and our panelists to come up to present our Innovation Places and Processes panel. So let's hear it for our panelists.
So, hello everybody. Welcome to the panel. And we're here today to talk about how ag tech innovation can be accelerated. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Ram, who leads the Innovation Hub here at ICRISAT. Carolina is from Cgiar, where she manages IP. And Yvonne is from A-Line, and she's also a center affiliate member of the Cgiar System Management Board. So what we're going to do today is provide you with a little bit of a framework on how to think about innovation, and then we're going to hear about how innovation is being approached from a high level within the CG from Yvonne. And then Carolina will provide us with an overview of some of the acceleration innovations that she's been reviewing. and then Ram will provide us with an overview of the iHub, and I'll close out with a very brief discussion about the Inspire Challenge. So here we have a 2x2 matrix that was been developed by a guy named Greg Sattel. And he defines innovation according to two criteria. How well is the problem defined, and how well is the knowledge base that's required to solve the problem? This is pretty useful because those dimensions provide some indication as to where innovation is going to take place, how long it's going to be, and how expensive it is. So here we have basic innovation, whose task is essentially to lay the groundwork for future developments. The problems are not very well defined. The knowledge base to solve it is not very well defined. An example of that is maybe the first 80 years of DNA research. Then up here, we have breakthrough innovation. The problem is much better defined. The knowledge base is not so well defined. An example of that is mapping the human genome. For our purposes here, this is super interesting, disruptive innovation. This is where the knowledge base to solve a problem is essentially there. The problem definition is not. Think Netflix version 1, when they were mailing CDs. A lot cheaper, the technology's there, they defined the problem, they solved it. And finally, incremental innovation up here, and that's where you improve something by 1% or 2%. So this is a pretty useful way to slice and dice different types of innovation. It's also a useful way to map innovation processes. So here I've just done a fairly simple schematic. Again, the same characters. You have basic DNA research here, leads to some breakthrough innovation on the Human Genome Project. A spill-off of that is a 2004 competition where the objective was to bring down the price of mapping a human genome to $1,000 and $100,000. At the time, it was about $1 million. One of the funded technologies was nanopore DNA sequencing. A company spun off from Oxford, which became Oxford Nanopore, and they have a DNA sequencer that's called the Minion. That sequencer is being used in the wheat rust Marple diagnosis project that was a winner of the Inspire Challenge a couple of years ago. This illustrates a little bit about how innovation works. So in a moment, I'm going to turn the floor over to Yvonne. She's going to tell us about, from a high level, how the CGs are approaching some of this, and then we're going to move down the line. We're going to try and finish up and leave about 20 to 25 minutes of time for discussion and questions. So with that, Yvonne, the floor is yours. The green button. The big one. Yeah, the big one.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I'm going to take Kelly's lead, and I'm going to wander around the stage. Let's see if I can get these slides smooth. Okay, I'm going to give you a very high-level introduction into deliberations that have been happening over the past 9 to 12 months. This is a group of people who are sitting across the 15, now 13 centers of the CGIAR, and working in conjunction with the 10 largest donors to the CGIAR. We've been thinking a bit about what innovation within the CGIAR does, or could be, and how we should be thinking about it. So I'm hoping that this will just help you to get a little bit of a sense of what thinking is going on in other parts of the ecosystem that helps to guide us towards discipline. And I'm going to say that again, discipline. We've been renowned for doing many things in many different divisions, but there isn't a clear strategic thread to some of the things we do. So are we addressing the problems that we encounter in the CG system? The two main areas are effective impact and integrated delivery systems from research to impact. Just two distinct processes, innovation itself and then the management of transformation. In those are really key areas of leveraging partners within the innovation and management processes, defining appropriate pathways to impact based on research and the modalities involved, and designing new structures and disciplined processes to make scalable impact a serious proposition. What are we exploring to achieve this? The couple of areas we looked into, so partnerships clearly, models of engagement that demonstrate the relevance of our research to people's lives, both partnerships with national systems and with the private sector and civil society. Within the innovation window, which includes all types of research and also policy-related areas, we've looked at the notion of stage gating. Stage gating is a very common proposition, and we've looked at whether or not it's possible to institute discipline in a stage-gated process across the CG. We've also looked at performance management with an end-to-end innovation process and looked at funding implications of scaling readiness. There are two areas of ecosystems in the agriculture sector, the agricultural ecosystem and the technology-related ecosystem. So I will come back to those. But both are necessary to develop a culture of learning about what's working by different models. In terms of ecosystem transformation, with only 2% of the global agriculture research for development money being committed to the CGIAR, it's important for us to think about who clarifies scaling readiness. So how do we learn also from the private sector in the right geographies, acknowledging that some of these are contextually driven solutions? And how do we also measure CG contributions in complex systems, particularly around scale and sustainability? We really need to look towards ecosystem transformation hubs to deliver multiple integrated R4D interventions and define our role in these. This is a diagram. There will be hundreds of these that you can find all over the internet. This is one that we worked on that we felt was more specific to the CGIAR, and it covers all research processes, upstream, applied, and indeed downstream research that may end up with proof of concept, transition to development and scaling, scaling itself, and then sustainable impact. I wanted to draw your attention briefly to an initiative out there, the International Development Innovation Alliance group, funded by a number of different people, really thoughtful thinkers about innovation in the development space. A couple of things that they've been able to demonstrate and aspirations for the CGIAR is how we build capacity actually for a greater appreciation of the transformation ecosystem, and how we convert what we might call winners to super winners. How we, in our research management, co-design scaling readiness and transition to scale from the outset, but through cycles of iterative learning from real examples, and ensuring that we have the right skill set in that mix. I think our previous panel alluded to that very nicely. Defining a workable key performance indicator framework that is designed for complex environments, and particularly for the notion of contribution analysis rather than attribution analysis, and into which readily scalable outputs can be introduced as part of a shared exercise. So this is not the CGIAR driving this unilaterally. This is as a result of partnerships in a viable ecosystem. Our ability to capture lessons from scaling and sustaining the CG outputs, including our interpretations of returns on investment and adaptive management for continuous improvement. It's incredibly important that we leverage additional partnerships, particularly for skill sets we may not have inside the CGIAR. The T-Hub here in Hyderabad is a perfect example that helps us understand what role those types of initiatives may play, and brings us face to face with investors who are patient in terms of their capital provision, and also those who are looking for specific returns on their investments. This is a very nice diagram. It comes from the International Development Alliance in Innovation, and the tagline is that it takes an ecosystem to scale an innovation. The whole landscape is currently populated with multiple pilots, and there is a philosophy that almost 100% of pilots succeed because they are created in controlled environments. There's another view, which is that almost none of these pilots scale. So the challenge to us is how to actually make sense of that. This really just shows, let's see if I can figure this out. Okay, well, let me just allude to the different, thanks. Okay, let me just allude to, if you can see this, the different institutions that are positioned along the scaling pathway. All of this material is publicly available, and there's plenty of case studies and analysis at various stages of this. Okay, so just moving on from that, a second very important concept is to have a clear idea as to the business model that underpins your innovation. I'm just going to give you 4 examples, and they are examples drawn from an analysis across multiple countries and trying to categorize by typology a series of innovations. The institutionalized model is a development of a solution and then handing it to a stakeholder who will deal with it in a market system. The commercialized model is funding or procuring in a private sector capacity a private sector player who will develop the technology and take it to market. The third is more in the environment of an innovation that has no intrinsic commercial value and is usually scaled by government. And the fourth is really a way of doing business, which means that in the days of old, we used phones that were attached to walls, and now we don't. Everybody's doing it. Finally, just a couple of resources you may be interested to see. These are all publicly available and on the net. I hope that just gives you an insight into the sort of thinking that the system has been doing around the enabling environment to ensure innovations can not only succeed, but they can scale with the right partners, the right skills, in the right context. Thank you.
Let me see. Okay. Yes, hello. I'm going to talk a little bit about how some of innovation has happened at Cgiar, and draw something as well from the big data platform. One thing that I did was actually to use the diagram that Kelly showed us, because I thought it was quite useful to map our experiences in that matrix. And I'm going to talk a little bit about these experiences here. So first of all, I would like to talk about the quality food crops. I know it's not a digital product, it's not based on data in particular, but it's something that has really grow in our system, in the Cgiar in general, and also in our center. And now, after many years of work, we have seen, large impact on this front. So we have several initiatives at CIAT. For example, some of them have run for 23 years or so, some for 15 years. And we see really innovation in the fields of the farmers. So, for example, PABRA is one of the initiatives on beans in Africa that after 23 years of work, it has released 450 varieties. It has a very interesting model operandi in terms of how they interact with the networks, how they have established networks with different stakeholders, and how they release the material. So I think it goes then to this sustaining innovation, but at the same time there is a lot of products out there. The other thing that we have done, we are doing at the moment, and they are not old, there are 3 initiatives. They are called the Climate Policy Hub, the Cgiar Amazonia Incubator, and the Knowledge Product Incubator. In the Climate Policy Hub, this is an initiative that really harness climate and economic analysis to guide how or how financing could be put for climate action. Basically, it's a service based initiative, and I think in the course of 2 years or so, it has really achieved quite a lot. There are 30 country smart profiles now in 30 different countries. And basically what it does is combines this kind of data, climate and economic data, to provide information for how to invest in climate action. The other one is the Cgiar Amazonia Incubator. This is in its infancy. The Cgiar Amazonia is part of a global initiative called Cgiar Global. It is actually funded by USAID, and it uses NASA technology. It's backed up by NASA, and it's all in the geospatial arena, and it's just to harness geospatial tools for environment action in the Amazonian basin. So this is going to this, in this scheme from disrupted to sustaining, because there is a lot of technology that is difficult to combine, and it's not it's not cheap. But then it it goes to that. The incubator, what it wants is really to put to use some of the tools for example, early warning systems for floods, for drought risk, for fire. We just recently saw how the Amazon was on fire. So then to put these tools, in this to this use. The other one is the Knowledge Product Incubator, and again, this has built up in for some years. CIAT has accumulated products in knowledge related to climate, related to economics. So there are business models, there are products, there are services related to land use, and the idea is to combine all of them and to put them in a package that can be used. We don't call it the end user, but really the next user, who may shape them in a form that is usable for the end user. And we find, the end user could be, in companies, the decision makers, and so on. And then I think one of the things, and I think is really a model of innovation, is the Inspire Challenge. So basically, to come together, to bring together to people and, from different walks of life to come up with solutions in different areas. And in this, we have thought about something like we want to call it for the time being, a digital accelerator in big data. And for that, we have, mapped different accelerators that we have found is that there are these elements, needed in the different accelerators, so a capacity to understand requirements. And basically, you see the list here is not very different from the things that we have heard in the previous sessions, capacity to understand requirements, to implement user-centered design, to understand business models and apply them, in different ways. One doesn't need to, to be married to a particular business model. That depends on the needs that we would like to address. Product design is very critical. I think we have not, developed that. We need to, something that actually is being done in the knowledge incubator is to assess the technological readiness and the market readiness of the different tools that we have to see, how we can design a product out of that. Marketing skills, tailored communication, capacity building. And in terms of the platform, this is what we would like to drive, to have these principles for collective action, and the previous session talked about that, some principles, some goals, and those should be rooted, we think, in the Sustainable Development Goals, and to have there some ethics, because the idea would be then to foster all of these, new actions in innovation based on principles and ethics of work. And here we have the FAIR principles to look for the privacy, the management of data, security of the data, and then to liaise with different initiatives. I think it's something that we haven't done enough at the Cgiar level is to really map the different initiatives that are out there, like for the one Ram is going to talk about, for example, here, and really within the Cgiar and out of the Cgiar, how to link with them, to this, foster this innovation. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Ram Dulipala. I am based out of ICRISAT. So while my slides are getting up there, so my designation at ICRISAT is I'm the theme leader for digital agriculture. But very often iHub, which is one of our initiatives, has become so popular, people associate me with iHub. Yeah. So anyway, so I just want to share with you a small journey. We began this research theme called Digital Agriculture and Youth in the year 2016, September 2016. And when we were starting this journey, we did a quick comparative advantage analysis of what ICRISAT and what Cgiar could offer in this space of digital agriculture. We figured out that our real comparative advantage is our perception that we are a neutral research entity having, very strong political capital, network, and connections. And once we figured out, and our real comparative advantage is probably not building out the technology platforms or the tools, right? There are companies out there who have mastered the process of software engineering, software development, etc. Once we got this, clear in our minds, then we asked another very fundamental question. What is our role going to be in this space called digital agriculture? Do we have a role? The answer was a big resounding yes, right? And our role, like if you remember Yon's slide where she was pointing to a research institution in that entire ecosystem, you need an anchor, you need a catalyst to kind of orchestrate that entire ecosystem. And probably Cgiar and ICRISAT could be that anchor institution while contributing through research, not only through research, but also being that anchor who holds this entire ecosystem, who orchestrates this entire ecosystem together, right? So I'll get on to my slides. This is one of my favorite quotes. It comes from the founder of the startup called Wiz, and he says, "Fall in love with the problem, not the solution." This is very often very, very true. I've been a technologist in the past. I experienced this syndrome very often without really articulating what is the problem you're trying to solve. You quite often jump into the solution. And there is no reason to believe that, all of us fall into this trap at some point in time or the other. So in iHub, we are kind of very deliberate. We are very aware of this syndrome that all of us get into when we go about our business. Yeah, a bit about incubation, a bit about iHub. Now, when we started this research program called Digital Agriculture, we didn't want, our question was, how do I make incubation a very normal, regular, day-to-day activity as part of our digital ag work, right? Typically, problem with incubators is they are viewed as this, peripheral units in research institutions with a mandate only to upscale innovation, right? How do you change that mindset? How do you bring incubation into the system so deeply blended into your day-to-day work? Because end of the day, an ecosystem, when you're speaking about catalyzing an ecosystem, when you're speaking about orchestrating an ecosystem, you need a much tighter collaboration. You need much tighter links between research institutions, because end of the day, innovation is not about one big activity. It is the summation of a number of different small parts, right? And there is a wide array of actors that need to interface with each other, that need to, they need to play out their roles for innovation to, come through the entire spectrum. So our challenge is, how do you make incubation, how do you change it from being peripheral into something that is mainstream? So this is where I think our real innovation with iHub has been. So our innovation has been, we have made iHub as an instrument of our research for the digital agriculture and youth theme, right? So we didn't leave it as a process that stays peripheral to the institution, but we brought it into the core of our day-to-day functioning. That's why if you go to iHub there, you'll pretty much see that some of the digital ag staff that are part of my team are co-located with these startups that are also, trying to create new products. And very often in most of the bilateral projects that we are delivering for our donors, for our constituents, a lot of these startup partners are also, very deeply blended into our day-to-day project work. So this is one unique innovation that we brought about in terms of blending innovation as a peripheral process into mainstreaming it. And, I've just laid out, in the interest of time, I won't go over all the bullets. So basically, once you have a research team, you also need to have a research agenda. So I've listed down the kind of research agenda that we try to undertake. Broadly, our research agenda is to undertake technical research and socioeconomic or development research. So essentially, the research that we do is something that is blended in with the day-to-day functioning of the startups, right? So that's been our incubation. But anyway, I've just listed down most of one unique phenomenon, something that happened with iHub, which is kind of an eye-opener to us. When we started iHub, we had this perception that, okay, this will be a platform where we will, upscale innovation. We will enable others to deliver innovation. But the beauty of innovation is sometimes it throws some really good surprises to you. The fact that iHub is located centrally and accessible to a lot of the other, other traditional researchers, some of these guys started interacting with startups over a cup of coffee and started. So some of the disciplines like our breeding units or our seed systems units started interacting with some of these startups or some of the tenants we have at iHub, and they started striking their own partnerships. And now they are kind of creating some new digital innovations that are being insourced back into some of our day-to-day ICRISAT processes. A classic example of that is a M&D product that ICRISAT and another startup called Verdantam have co-created. It's called Measure. It automates, monitoring and evaluation. So that's a very interesting learning that we could uncover over the last 3 years. Moving on. This is again, it's a small snapshot of sorry, how do I move back? How do I move back? Red button, okay. Okay, this is again based on the journey so far in 3 years. This is our snapshot. This is the way we think the research, digital ag research should be. Probably this is our view of, I'm sorry, this. Yeah, this is our view of the way digital agriculture is going to progress. We have listed down some 5 pillars we think where digital will make a very big impact on agriculture. I have just again listed down, and I've also written down some products or our contributions into this space. I won't go much into that. But yeah, this is again a quick start. The journey has been great so far. Our incubation, or we have worked with close to 20 startups till date. Our startups span the entire spectrum of the innovation pipeline. Like we've enabled startups that are at a fairly early stage, somebody trying to do a proof of concept, all the way till we work with a bunch of startups that are, have a fairly mature product but are looking for the right connections, right networking opportunities so that they can upscale innovations. Couple of those upscaling innovations that I'd like to call out are Plantix. When they started with us, they were about 5,000 downloads. As of today, Plantix is one of the most successful active startups, having 9 million downloads, over 1 million active sessions. Another startup that I'd like to mention is about a startup called Kalgudi, which is also doing some great work. Coincidentally, the game app all of you are playing has been developed by Kalgudi. So that's the journey so far. It's been a great ride. We are also learning in the process, and I'm happy to take some questions once Kelly allows me to.
Great. Thank you, Ram. So I think we'll forego the last slide and open the floor up for questions. And I have 2 questions for the panelists and 1 question for the audience. So the questions for the panelists, and you can take, maybe we'll have one of you answer 1 question. So Yvonne mentioned winners and super winners, and I'm interested in their innovation efforts. What's better for ag? A super winner or a half a dozen winners? So that's 1 question you can take. The second question is from the previous panel. So what are you doing to address the bottom 10%? And here I'd like you to be very specific, not policy-oriented, but give us some examples. From the audience, do we have any contrarians out there? We must, at least one. Well, think about it, because I will call on a contrarian from the audience to comment after their answers. Thank you. Please.
Hello, can you hear me? Well, thank you, Kelly. It's always a joy to work with you. Winners and super winners. I think we need to be really thoughtful about that. One might say a winner is a program that works and a super winner is one that's sustained and scaled. I don't think it's as simple as that. Agriculture is highly contextualized. Language, culture, approach to farming system, characteristics of the farming environment, the degree to which you have a mature or immature ecosystem, the ability for finance to be available or not are conditioning factors in whether a solution works and whether that solution can be sustained. So I think in the simplistic language that we used in the slides that we presented, we have tried to demonstrate the difference between the first 3 stages of scaling, which is an exciting experimental time where we need to be really careful about being very prescriptive about what we think success looks like. Ultimately, the last 3 stages of success or scaling are defined by market worthiness and sustainability within that market. So I would say, simplistically, Kelly, winners are in the first 3 stages of scaling, super winners are those that have made it through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. The question is, should we have winners or super winners?
No, bottom 10%.
What are we doing for bottom 10%? Well, at least, in IHub, most of the entrepreneurs that we are working with, we try to, nudge them towards creating services that are relevant for the bottom 10%. And glad that most of the ecosystem or most of the players are actually nudging in that direction. Like in the morning, one panel mentioned about this agripreneur model, right? So when you're creating local youths in the community, like we do have this challenge of last mile being able to access digital platforms. That's where they are creating these agripreneurs who become that mediated gateway for last mile to access some of these digital platforms. That would be our contribution to the bottom 10%.
So which one should I take? Well, actually, I think in terms of the winners and non-winners, I like what Yvonne says because, I mean, everything depends on the context in terms of how you define that. For the initiatives that we have run that I just presented, I would say that some of them, because some of them are quite new, it's difficult to put, you know, a winner tag to those. We'll see how that goes and how that works for that 10%, you know, that we are discussing. For the ones that are related to crop products, I should say that they are really winners there. I mean, because they have, and this is a long innovation process, right? It's not a short one as data, you know, a data-driven process could be. But they are really tangible wins, for example, for this program that I just mentioned in Africa. And it's not only the number of the varieties, but really that they have you know, achieve larger, higher yield, you know, in production, but really in a substantial way, 36%, you know, more yield in bean production. Also, in the way that they have integrated, which is very interesting, I mean, in terms of that 10% and a real ecosystem of participation. And it's the way that they establish partnerships and work with different people, you know, to come up with products based on beans. So, for example, there is the sole entrepreneur who is a mother, you know, a sole mother that creates a product and they help, you know, for that. But there are the farmers' communities, also the companies that want to produce, you know, processed beans, etc. So you have the whole spectrum, you know, of partners in that value chain. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I see a hand there. Yes.
Thank you, Kelly. So you asked for a contrarian view, and as being Dutch, I'm always happy to provide that. I think the word that comes to my mind is serendipity. So if we want to scale to impact, we need a lot of things to accidentally somehow fall together. Yeah. So whether there's a winner, it's not something we can actively steer. This just happens because there's a nice entrepreneur like you with your iHub who can take it on. But maybe he will fail after a year. So if we are so dependent on serendipity, how do we you know, overcome these barriers we see? And I think one key thing for me is that we need to not think of the traditional models as a researcher and as an entrepreneur that we have in our mind. Like, I'm a researcher and I'm only a researcher, and that's why I will do only this part. So we need to be much more cross-sectoral also in our thinking and what we need to do. Thank you.
Okay, other comments or questions? We'll take a couple. Okay, just to repeat the question if I understand it then. So basically you're saying that the impact is due to several different factors, and that as such there's several different perspectives or disciplines or approaches that need to be integrated. Is that correct? Comments?
Size is not everything. I think that's the point I wanted to make. I completely agree with you. I think it's much like having a child in this world. At some stage it leaves you. You want to give it every opportunity, but success or failure will be determined by that child's interaction in the wider world. And there is something that is organic and intrinsic about that you may not be able to do anything about. So I would totally agree with you. You can set up the conditions for success to happen. Ultimately, across the globe, 80% of startups fail. for all kinds of reasons, and I don't think those statistics are going to be any different in this sector.
Absolutely agree. It's, as I said, it's many small parts that need to work. For instance, take the case of GPS technology, invented in '79, mobile GPS came in '99, Google Maps came in 2005, but you had to wait until 2011 for a different guy to come and make Uber, right? So that's innovation in reality. So the answer is agility, right? How quickly can you fail and how quickly can you pivot to a new model? And for that, you also need different kinds of organizations. You can't expect, for instance, look at how corporates are approaching innovation, right? Most of them work with startups today or outsource innovation to ecosystem players like T-Hub to insource innovation, right? And it's a learning process. All of us are learning, but the answer is how can we institutionalize it and how can we keep doing things better and better?
Well, I think if the comment is, or the question was in relation to innovation, I would like to say that one thing that I've seen as important factor in that is cross-fertilization. And by that I mean different disciplines coming together, and not disciplines, but expertises. So here we have, we are talking about, researchers and so on, but we have seen that we need people with other skills. So marketing, product design, and we need strongly that. And I think in the CG, we haven't had that much, of that. So we need to have it.
So other questions or comments? Well, let me take a crack at answering your question then. I think you're right. But I think basically what it comes to is innovation management. And what are you trying to do, and where is your sweet spot? So let me turn back to the last slide that I was going to present here. Are there any questions? Okay. So this is the Inspire Challenge results for the last 3 years. You have the finalists, we have the number of submissions, the finalists, and the winners. And what you see is in 2017, 54% were in basic research. Unlikely that's going to have any impact on anything soon. That's been declining for 3 years. Over here, you see a slight increase. In incremental innovation, you see a very dramatic increase. So if you're going to do some innovation where you're interested in impacting the bottom 10%, essentially, this is where you want to be, because that's where you're reducing cost and price, and that's where you can make the impact. On incremental, the incumbents are there, they're already doing it. 2% isn't going to do any good. On breakthrough, who's going to benefit from that? Who bought the first iPhones? Not the bottom 10%. So a little bit of an answer. So we have time for one more question and one very quick comment. And if we don't, then we'll close the session. We don't. Thank you very much for coming today.
All right, thank you again to all of our lovely panelists. Let's have another round of applause for them. It makes the photo less awkward. In the meantime, it is now 12 o'clock, so we will be heading to lunch. Lunch will be served in the courtyards in the main tent again, so please grab some lunch, and after lunch there are exploration hours and breakouts, and then we will be meeting back here in the afternoon for our Inspire pitches. So keep track of your schedule, go to sessions, go check out the demos, get some food, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks.